we need to call the roll for the workshop?
Yes, Mayor, I can call the roll.
Okay, if we need to, sure. Go ahead, please.
Mayor Kaufman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bergen?
Here.
Councilmember Berzins? Councilmember Berzins? Councilmember Coombs?
Present.
Councilmember Gardner?
Here.
Councilmember Gruber?
Here.
Councilmember Hiltz?
Here.
Councilmember Lawson?
Here.
Councilmember Johnston?
Here.
Member Marcano?
Present.
And Councilmember Murillo.
Sorry to interrupt. Councilmember Berzin says she's there, but she's been muted.
Okay, let me check on that. Thank you.
Okay, budget update, discussions 2020, 2022. Greg, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you very much. Katie, can you give me a share access?
Yes, one moment.
Thank you for putting me back on.
All righty. Can everybody see my presentation? This is 2021.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So today we're going to be talking about budget discussions. It's going to be pretty interesting. It's a little messy this year, so we're going to break it into 3 different pieces. We're going to talk about 2020 actuals and recommendations, then go into 2021 projection and then recommendations on that, and then 2022 and recommendations on that. We're going to talk about the Capital Projects Fund, and then get into how to discuss any ongoing council ideas from there. And a lot of this,
Greg?
we've actually, oh yes.
Will you switch your display settings? We can see the notes version of this.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for letting me know. Is that better?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for letting me know. And so a lot of this we actually talked to you about during the winter workshop. So a lot of this is just going to be a rehash of what we already told you about a couple of months ago, back in February. So before I start into this, I want to just show you a little video about what I think about the budget process. I'm calling it the budget process again. So one of the things that, oh, let's see. Oh, there we go. Is it moving? Oh my gosh. Wow, I just turned off completely.
Yeah, the presentation.
We see you now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. My entire PowerPoint just went away.
Oh.
That's fun.
Here's
I have
the
to
video.
do it by memory now.
Yeah, we're done. That was it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right. We're back. Is it on the main one or is it on the share display settings?
It's on the notes again.
It's on the which one?
Notes again.
Thank you.
So you can just switch to display settings.
Yep. I'm on it. All right, so the budget process, we worked last year to dig ourselves out. And yet here we go and happily jump right back in again. So that's what budget process all over again. So let's jump into this, all right? So in summary, we're going to talk about the 2020 general fund, much better revenue, especially in sales tax. We talked about that in February. Expenditures ended the year close to projection, and there will be some one-time funds available for prioritized projects. 2021, we're going to talk about it. After about 3 months, revenues are running better than projected. Expenditures are pretty darn close. We're going to add to fund balance, but we want to be conservative. And we want you to be conservative about what you do with any of that. Another thing that's going on in 2021, you're going to have a separate presentation about the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds. And so there's going to be some work to to spend some of that. And in 2022, got good news. Looks like early on, we're going to have some additional ongoing funds for ongoing ads. All right, so let's start with our general fund discussion for 2020. And what I'm doing is I'm breaking this into the three different pieces. And then I'm going to ask for, I'm going to give you a recommendation and ask for your approval of those recommendations by year to try to make this a little bit cleaner. All right, so 2020 actuals to projection, about 26.4 million in additional operating revenue. We talked to you about this in February. Although we found one more couch and found a little bit more money than we talked about before in the couch cushions. We had about 24 million before. Now we've got about 26.4 million. We projected that we were going to be down about 6.8%. We ended up 5.3% up. Capital revenue ended up better by about $4.3 million. Of course, we transferred that over to the capital projects fund. That's what we do with the capital revenue. The expenditures were within 0.1% of our projection. Pretty interesting, pretty darn close. The capital transfer was $4.3 million more, but we did have some savings. If you remember the 2020 CARES fund and that $33.8 million or so that we had to spend by year end, remember that. And we were working really, really hard to spend it by year end. And then at the very end of last year, kind of in the November timeframe, the county started saying, you know what, you can use public safety for CARES funds. And so we said, great, you had already approved a list of projects that came up to $33.8 million. And what we're able to do is to put the public safety costs toward the CARES fund, create some savings in the general fund, which allowed us to not have to spend stuff by year end. All right, so all we're doing is kind of switching dollars over from one place to another. And there's about $4.4 million that are left in CARES projects that we just didn't get to by the year end. You're going to see that in the spring supplemental. All right, very technical. Also, there's going to be some reappropriation of budget that wasn't spent in the spring supplemental as well. So the plan for the additional $26 million, and if anybody remembers back to February, a lot of these are the same bullet points that we talked about before. First thing we'd like to do is to refill the operating reserve back to 3%. That'll be about $7.2 million one time. We had a pretty big presentation on the enterprise resource planning, the ERP system. It was HR, finance, IT all came together and talked about this ERP system. You said run with it. It's the one that improves the management of tasks on the core accounting, human resources, and payroll. So we're looking at that. Additional one-time funds from the negotiations and the fact that we got rid of 3 furlough days. We had a discussion on that last time about how many days to get rid of. So we did eliminate the last 3 furlough days. That's going to cost, we're going to need to come up with about $1.6 million one time. You had already heard about the extra risk insurance, so we could put some toward that. About $1.2 million of that is reappropriated in the spring supplemental. And then the remaining I-70 Piccadilly match after doing some work in there was about $5 million. That leaves about $4 million for other ideas, including any thoughts council has or anything else. So our recommendation is to fund those items as noted on the last slide. Second thing, we're going to find good prioritized uses for the additional $4 million. Now I'm going to say this a lot today. You don't have to spend the money just because you have it. All right. We've asked departments for one-time ideas, including rebudgeting for cuts made in 2021. There's about $2.8 million of one-time cuts that were made in the 2021 budget. And so we could fund those. So I'm going to stop there and say, are you okay with our recommendations for 2020?
Comments?
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So on the Piccadilly, you said it's $5 million that is remaining for our match. What was the total match?
Jason, do you want to pop into this? We initially had $16 million, and then there was another need for some, but we're getting some money from other sources.
Yeah, I can address that, Greg.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, so originally the project was, we were seeking the 25 million in federal funds. We were looking at, we said I 50 million.
You're coming in
You're
broken.
breaking up on us, Jim.
Okay, let me take off my video, see if that helps.
That helps.
We're looking at 15 million of our own money, city money for match, looking at going to the development community for match. And then last fall, it looked like we were actually going to need more than that. So the 15 and 15 would have been 30 million in addition to the 25. What we did is we have partnered with ARDA with their expansion. They're going to be able to fund between, I think in the neighborhood of 17 to 20 million of that additional that we were needing. So we don't have to go to the development community. And in effect, the development community has come to us through ARDA. So this
Still confusing.
5 million, this 5 million that we're addressing in Greg's slide here is, if our costs for right-of-way acquisition and construction, it's kind of our just in case costs are greater than we're anticipating, we'd have that 5 million available.
Okay, but the total that we needed to come up with was 15 or 25?
Okay. The original full cost was 55 million.
Right.
25 federal money, 15 from the city, and then 15 from the development community.
And the
Last
15,
fall.
oh, go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. No,
Well, the
I was going to say,
15 from the development, is that for sure? I guess that's that's the part.
yeah, and what that is that's now going to come from ARDA.
Okay, oh, yes. Okay, got it. I remember. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and then one more question. I know we have the other presentation, the American Rescue Plan. So as far as transportation needs, are we going to look at those needs under that section or now? Like Gun Club Road, for example.
Sure. So what I would say is we're gonna talk about, this is not gonna specifically go into transportation needs or anything like that. There'll be another presentation that goes into possibility ways to fund the $20 million road maintenance shortfall and also the backlog of projects associated with road maintenance.
Okay.
As far as the big list of projects. So today you're going to have the first ever meeting where you start talking about capital infrastructure master plan projects.
Right.
All right. Now this one today's is going to be IT related, focused on IT projects. You will have another meeting where you're going to be talking about transportation related capital infrastructure master plan, which would include that isn't part of today's presentation.
Okay, but as far as money's remaining, so we're not going to talk about putting any monies towards any roads today, because there's lots. Obviously, I mean I know we have the road maintenance proposal, but that list that we're not going to address today, the capital projects.
And
I guess my concern is we're spending money without knowing the rest of the story.
So I actually have an answer for that, because you're about 4 or 5 slides ahead of me. When we start getting to 2021, I'm going to talk about the fact that we've got money available in 2021, but I don't want you to spend it.
Okay.
Specifically for that, and specifically for the fact that we're just unsure. At the moment, it looks like we've got money, but we're unsure. But there are a lot of needs out there.
Sure.
And we want to take a prioritized look at all of those needs.
Okay, so I sent an email last night to the council members and the mayor about the drainage issues that we've had in the last 3 years, I guess, basically in Southeast Aurora. And I sent the 2 letters that staff sent to the residents, over 100 residents. Basically, because of COVID, we didn't have the monies to take care of their chase drains. And the chase drain, it was a pilot program that the chase drain solved. So if I'm asking for that to be funded, where am I asking for that?
You know what? I'm starting a list, and I've got some other people in budget that are starting lists. So we'll take that under advisement.
Okay, so if you could put chase drains for the all the residents that had appointments and received the letters. And I believe it's about 600,000. Thank you.
First,
Further discussion,
Okay.
Further discussion.
Excuse me.
Councilmember Versens.
Thank you. And Greg, I don't want to get ahead of you either. But when we get to talking about how we're going to spend the extra money, I guess I'm curious, why are we asking our employees to take furlough days when we have money to pay them?
In fact, we eliminated the last 3 furlough days, and the only reason that we're still not out of the woods. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is the fact that we really don't know the end of COVID, and we don't know what's going to happen. If you remember, and yeah, I'll talk about this a little bit, but if you remember, we actually did better than other cities during COVID. And we think that a lot of that, or part of that, had to do with the fact that our employees non-COVID time tend to go to other cities to go to work. And because they didn't do that, then their dollars stayed at home. And so we don't know what's going to happen when people start going back to work. Is the inverse going to be there, and all of a sudden we'll start losing money where we gain some in comparison to? So there's still some uncertainties out there, and we're going to stay conservative with all of this.
Well, you always have, and I appreciate that, but I just don't want our employees to lose money if we have money. And I understand where you're coming from.
And so if you think about the effect of the 3 fewer furlough days, they did get a 2% pay increase, and initially it was going to be offset with 5 furlough days. Now they're going to get a 2% pay increase, and the 2 furlough days that everybody has already had. So there will be a net positive in people's pockets that were not part of the 2021 adopted.
That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And
Further discussion.
yes, Mayor, I could just mention that, Mayor Pro Tem mentioned the chase drain request, and we have, I think, several other council members that have things that they would like to do. And I don't know, Greg, would it be best now for them to just go ahead and mention those so you can add them to your list?
Well, I'll tell you what. Yeah, I guess I don't see why not. Maybe what we should do is to get through 2021, and I mean, we could either do it now or do it at the end. It's up to you.
Why don't we do it at the end?
Okay. Great.
Further discussion.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh,
right.
Nicole. No, I was just going to say, fortunately we have the backup. Ideally, I would have rather have had the capital needs discussion before council requests. But I know we all read that, so we know there are some huge asks with that. But no, I was just going to say having that discussion, going through all of this so Greg can really paint that picture, at least publicly for those who are tuning in, I think is better than putting those requests in now. So thank you.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you. Jim, I have a question regarding the Piccadilly match, that 5 million figure. That is just being set aside in the event that we actually do need to fill that gap, correct? It's not necessarily spent yet. And the reason I ask is, I know Luke was going to bring this specific issue, or incorporate this issue rather, into the list of projects, I think, and proposals that he sent to Congressman Crow's office for potential earmarking in the future. Is that still accurate?
That is, and you're right. The 5 million is like insurance, I think, because like I said, we still have to purchase right of way. We haven't taken bids on the project. And so we just want to make sure that we can, that we've got enough set aside to be able to pay for it.
Okay,
and it would be great if we got additional funding elsewhere. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection in terms of giving staff direction that was requested on 2020 OBFP recommendations? Objection?
Okay.
Seeing none, then that's the direction to staff.
Great. Then, like good sheep, let's go ahead and jump right into 2021. All right, so let's go with the review of how we balanced 2021. If you remember, during the balancing of that, we had $32.9 million that we needed to balance. We did it with about a $12.3 million reduction in either what we call base or pro forma reductions, including the 2% pay was offset with the 5 furlough days to equate to a 0% pay increase. We had 0% health insurance, and we didn't hire the 15 police officers that we had in the pro forma. We had $9 million in department cuts. 6.2 million of that was ongoing, and 2.8 million of that was one time. We used some additional revenue, 2.7 million, and then about $9 million worth of funds available. That was part of that $32.9 million. So our current projection, the good news, I'm going to split this into good news and bad news. The good news is more than the bad news, but I want you to be careful with it. So far, sales tax is good. And I'll give you a slide here in a second to show you about that. Christmas, I'm calling it crazy good. It was really something to look back at, something that I didn't even notice. Busily with my head down, looking back and balancing 2020, didn't notice how good Christmas was. Third-party facilitators keep on trucking along. And the other good news is this: because we beat the 2020 projection so handily, even flat revenue growth, and we've had months with flat revenue growth from prior year, is good news to us. The other good news, moneymaker Trevor Vaughn just continues going on. Our audit revenue had the biggest month ever in February, $3.1 million. And then capital, especially that building material use tax, is starting out great versus our projections. So here's my picture of recent sales tax performance. And one thing that we've changed from the way we showed you this before is that we're now calling out that marketplace facilitator money. If you remember, we were going along last year and had that horrible month in May and then was just kind of flat throughout. Had a good month in July. Remember, that was that one-time check that we received from a technology company. Biggest check we'd received. And then starting in September, we started getting that marketplace facilitator. And that's what that kind of yellowish color is on there, is the effect of the marketplace facilitator. You'll notice it helped us out in a lot of months. It even caused us to not be as negative in a couple of those months. If you look at October, we would have been about 4% down if not for the marketplace facilitator that caused us to be a kind of flat. The same thing happened in February of this year. But if you look at that, November and December were great. January was great. March, this is hot off the press. March was another good month, a very good month. And the best news to me about this is that January, February, and March, that is not necessarily due to those one-time companies. That's kind of overall strength. So it's good news to us. I don't want to get too optimistic about it, but before, when you're looking at toward the second half of last year, when we had a lot of one-time payments and a lot of companies getting money from companies that we didn't necessarily get, that's kind of moving down a little bit. And we're still having some pretty good months. So that's good news for us. But let me show you holiday sales. This is the growth in holiday sales. So what we do is we take our December and January sales tax. And what that is, that equates to November sales and December sales. So the Christmas season, and we track it over time. Look at that this year, 13.9% over a very good holiday sales season last year. All right, that is something else. Now, I think that looking back, there may be some reasons for that. People still had the one-time money. They still had their checks. I think that the entertainment dollars that people couldn't spend last year probably went toward presents. So if I couldn't go to a Rockies game or go to a Broncos game or go to Buell or even go to the movies, I had some money, and so I spent it on Christmas. That's a possibility. But it was very good news for us. I also think, just personally, that people spending a lot of time home, like with their family and watching their kids go to school online and kind of feeling sorry for them. Maybe we're a little bit better over Christmas. Whatever the case, we had an awfully good year for sales tax, for Christmas sales. To the tune that after 3 months, we're about $11 million over the projection in sales tax. So, very good news. Now let me tell you the bad news. Most revenue streams that aren't called sales tax or audit or BMUT are running below projections at the moment. Now it's not a lot, and that sales tax is definitely the biggest news. We're definitely in the positive, but those items that we thought were going to come back a little bit faster aren't coming back as fast. So the lodger's tax is still down, and people still aren't driving. So the gas tax money, highway user tax is not coming up. External charges aren't coming up as much, but the whole news about the year so far has been that sales tax has been great. And there's still a bit of uncertainty. The continuing stimulus effects, what's going to happen with the stimulus dollars? How is that going to look to us? What is the tail of COVID? When does this stop? And what does it look like when it stops? And what is, and I talked about this a little bit before, what is our revenue going to do once COVID is over, and are people going to go back to work and then start spending money in other cities? And what's going to happen when all of a sudden the Beal does open and you can go to Rockies games and you can go to Broncos games? Yeah, are those dollars going to leave the city and go back to other places? So there's a lot of uncertainty in there. All right, so here we go. Now this is so hot off the presses. We did get our leads projection. I'm going to tell you how hot off the presses this is. We got the leads projection data Thursday night late, 8 or 9 o'clock. Friday was a furlough day. I spent a little bit of time over the weekend on it, looking at it. But I'm not the smart guy in the office of budget. There's Bill Levine, our revenue guy. There's Jackie. There's Kirsten. There's Mike Franks. None of them had a chance to look at it yet. And then this thing was built on Monday and went out to you and was in the packet by Monday night. So that's how hot off the presses it is. All right. So the leads projection is the scholarly examination of Aurora revenue. They look at a lot of economic inputs: personal income, retail trade, GDP, employment, vehicle sales, and construction. Our current projection, the leads projection versus the current. Here's this number: leads projection, sales tax close to $30 million more than what we had before. Now, most of that is the continuation of the 2020, the fact that we just beat 2020 so well, and then a little bit better in 2021. And honestly, after 3 months, we're $11 million up. $30 million is in the target range. I would say that I wouldn't be surprised if that 30 was more like 25 or 22, or there's a big range. We're talking about big stuff, and my smart people haven't really looked at this. We've got some questions back into them on some things, but it looks like good news.
Oh, can I ask a question about this?
Yes.
They were way off on the COVID projection.
Yep, I think a lot of people were.
How much do you value their projection here?
So I'm going to get into that in a little bit. I'm using their pessimistic numbers. I think that they're a little too optimistic at the moment, but that's just an eyeball view. It's not, like I said, I'm not the one that should be making all these numbers. But I do think that they were a little bit. I think they guess low on one side and they're guessing a little high on the other. But these are actually, even using their pessimistic model, these are the numbers that are showing up. So our recommendation, because we're unsure of where we're going, is to leave most of this funds available gathered in 2021 for future unbudgeted uses. I'm going to say it again. You don't have to spend it just because you have it. There's still a lot of uncertainty out there. There's a lot of things that are going on that we just don't know what's going to happen. And I love this. I think I'm going to get a tattoo of this. Funds available doesn't go bad. I'm not going to come to you in a couple months and go, oh my gosh, all of our funds available molded. We can't use it anymore. We'll always be able to use it. All right. Another reason why we think that we should leave this money alone, we're gonna have to start figuring out uses for the ARPA funds. That's good. That presentation is gonna come in a bit, but there's gonna be a lot of work that's going into this, and you do have to spend that. I think we have to get it all spent by 2024. We have time to do it. It's not like last year when they gave us 9 months to spend $30 million. We've got time. But we've got a lot of work to do to spend that money. Now we can use either pot. If we will have any 2022 ongoing ads that we want to start a little bit earlier, then we can do that. One more recommendation that I don't have on here, but I kind of feel strongly about this as far as 2021 is concerned, and especially spending money. We've got a spring supplemental coming up, and if there's something that absolutely has to be spent right now, we can put it in the spring supplemental. But we also have other chances to spend money in 2021. We've got a fall supplemental, and we've got a 2022 spring supplemental that we can adjust the budget in arrears. And when you put things in this, when anyone puts things in the spring supplemental, they become prioritized over the big list of priorities. And it would be much better for all of us if any additional needs and anything that we're going to hear about from anybody gets put in as part of the 2022 budget. Now we can start them early, but I just want to be sure that they're kind of all in with the 2022 budget, only just that it helps with the prioritization of the whole entire list. So with that, are you okay with our 2021 recommendations, basically just leaving the money alone?
Just a question.
Yes.
What I brought up earlier with the drainage was supposed to be in the 2020 budget, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because it was delayed.
And I will tell you in a little bit, we're going to talk about capital projects fund, and there's some money in the capital projects fund right now as well.
Okay.
Further discussion? I'm sorry. Councilmember Maria.
Yeah, Greg, I just want to make sure I have a couple of budget asks as well. When would be the most appropriate time to talk about those?
I think that let me get through this and get through 2022, and then we'll kind of open it up. How about that?
Okay, I think it might have been mentioned earlier, so I might have missed that. Thank you.
And I think I may have seen an email. So, all right, great. Anything else about 2021?
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there an objection to the staff recommendation on 2021? Okay, that's the direction.
Right. Great. Then like good sheep, let's go on into 2022. All right, so the first blush of the leads projection. So now I'm going to focus just on the leads projection. I want you to notice that 2021's fairly close, lumped together. So this is the optimistic, the baseline, and the pessimistic. 2023 through 2025 are pretty darn close together. The only one that really has any variance is in 2022. And if you look at that, we've either got a choice of 2%, 4%, or 6%. I will tell you that in looking at that, I think that the pessimistic version of the 2022 number feels better in my brain, that 2%. And I'll tell you why. So the first thing is, and the biggest thing for me, is that third-party marketplace facilitators will already be in the base. And so I'm just going to go backwards just a little bit. Back to this chart right here. Remember, we started a marketplace facilitator in September. Those 4 months, that marketplace facilitator helped us to get that 5.3% growth in 2020. And it's going to help us get the growth in 2021 for the first 9 months. All right, for the first 8 months. And what that means is that by 2022, all of that's going to be in our base. So any growth that we're going to have is not going to be assisted by a third-party marketplace facilitator. The second reason why I think that we should be really cautious and use a lower number on this is that people got stimulus checks in 2020 and they got stimulus checks in 2021. I don't think they're going to get stimulus checks in 2022. All right, so that's money that they were spending that was helping out our sales tax bottom line in those 2 years. They're not going to help us in 2022. The last thing is that it's built-in conservativeness. Like I said, we haven't played around with this money a lot, but it seems reasonable. And even the pessimistic assumption here adds $19 million ongoing. All right, so let's look at why why we have $19 million. Remember, our old projection had a pretty significant drop and then was kind of flat in 2021. And then after that, Leeds was going to allow us to grow out of that. So I have almost an 8% increase and then another really high 7% increase. Well, because we didn't drop, we're also not going to be able to grow like that. All right. So the new line is a lot more flat. And there's our 2% down. Then it kind of sits in that 4% range in the other years. And so that's where we're sitting right now in terms of old versus the new leads. So this, we talked about this. This is another slide that was brought up to you during the winter workshop. If we had ongoing funds, what would we do with them? The first thing we're going to do, we had a 2022 shortfall in our projection of $3.4 million. We got to take care of that. The Equal Pay Act and the equity compensation we talked about before, $1 million, $1.5 million. That's actually a council, was on the council's list of things to look at as well. The risk cost, you heard about risk costs earlier this year. We'd want to pay for that. The ERP costs, you told us to run with it. So those are going to be part of it. And even with all of that stuff, we would still have $9 million for ongoing ads. Now, I'm going to give you the same caveat that I did before. I'm not the smart guy with the numbers. I want my revenue team to look at the numbers and focus on them. I wouldn't be surprised at all if 19 million was closer to 15 million or something like that. The good news that it's definitely not zero. So there's good stuff there. So we'll have some money in there for ads. We've asked departments for ongoing ideas, including the rebudgeting for cuts made in the 2021 budget. We cut about $6.1 million, including some FTE. But council could be making recommendations as well. So some of the recently discussed council ideas, transportation, $20 million ongoing. We've been talking about this a lot. We've got a whole another presentation where we're going to talk about this. The military differential pay was on a short list. Eliminating the treat no transport fee, $450,000. And there you go. Those equity initiatives that were part of the last list, $1.5 million. I added to this the 2020 council cuts. We cut travel by 22,000. We cut the contingency by 15,000. Operating supplies by 18,000. If there's anything that council would want to bring back, you just need to let us know as we're going through. So our recommendation about 2022 is I want to balance 2022 and at least one more year. Once again, you don't have to spend it just because you have it. That $19 million that I talked to you about actually balances not only 2022, but 2023 as well. The other recommendation is that we're going to continue spending those ARPA funds in however we can. And with that, I'm going to stop. Say, are you okay with the 2022 recommendations?
There, I have a question. Greg, I just had just a quick question on your sales tax old versus new annual growth rates, that particular chart. Are you taking in consideration as well as what you mentioned in the prior presentation about people maybe leaving the city, not leaving the city directly, but going to work in Denver, wherever? Is that projection of what you're having, is that something that's a factor that's included in this growth chart in terms of the revenue?
So I'm going to say that I don't think that it's specifically taken into account, but I would say that by using the pessimistic model, I'm already putting a factor of conservatism into that number. So typically when we've used the leads numbers in the past, we've used their baseline model. And I would go one step further is we'll take their baseline model, but then I'll give it a haircut because if their baseline model is basically a 50-50 choice. All right. So, and I'm like, I never want my revenue to be a 50-50 choice. I always want to be on the right side. So we'll shave it down some. I did the same thing here with this. But so I'm being conservative, but I would not be surprised if we're entirely said and done and that 2% turns out to be 1% or turns out to be more flat. And that's why I'm giving you this number that's basically a mathematical number with a caveat, but I'm also saying I'm not going to be cutting $18 million out of a projection.
Further discussion.
Greg, this is Dave.
Yes.
Councilmember Gruber.
I think it's important. We don't see the charts here, but at the M&F committee, we typically look, or not typically, but we often look at the sales tax charts or the revenue charts for our surrounding cities. Lone Tree has taken a massive hit as a result of COVID and the fact that people aren't going down to Park Meadows anymore. I think that, Greg, just to emphasize the point that you're making, once COVID is over, once the malls open up, once that shopping and the restaurants surrounding Aurora start opening fully, I think that there's a good chance that our numbers are going to drop. Yes, we were successful in increasing the revenue that we have from Amazon and others. And again, thanks to Trevor Vaughn and all the work he did on that. But I think it's prudent to understand that the malls are going to come back following COVID, and that will hurt us.
Absolutely.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to staff recommendation? Okay.
All right, great. Then let me just spend a little bit of time on the capital projects fund. So we do have some additional funds to spend in 2020. Remember, I already talked to you about the fact that we're about $4 million better. So we can put that toward things. 2021, currently after a couple of months, we're over by 2.7 million. And even the conservative estimate of leads, if you add everything up, will add up to about $12 million over the 5-year plan. In the past, when we've talked about additional money going in, we'd say, all right, if there's any ideas, we'll have ideas. But if not, and we still have additional funds, then we'll prioritize towards transportation. Is that still a good assumption for the capital projects fund?
Discussion?
Yeah, to answer that question, Mayor, my answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're all.
I agree. I agree. Further discussion, comments? Is there objection? Seeing none, then that's the direction.
All right, excellent. Then just like good little sheep, then we'll jump right into this. If any of you have any ideas, I think right now would be an okay time to bring it up. Or if you'd rather send information to Jim separately, that would work too. We're gonna create lists as we go.
Okay, discussion.
Berzins?
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. So are you saying this is a time to ask for wants?
Jim, are you okay with that?
Yeah, and like I said before, I think that we've got several council members that do have, I mean, that I've talked to that have things for the council to consider. And I don't know, Greg, would the protocol be that they bring it up here, and if there's consensus to move forward, that it then go into the spring supplemental?
I would say that we can bring it up here, and if there's consensus that we make it a priority in the 2022 budget. Like I said, we have time to spend it, and if we want to spend it now, we can do it in the spring supplemental, or we can spend it and do it in the fall supplemental. There's lots of different options there of when to actually budget for the money. But I think the real thing is to say, yes, it's worth putting money into, and then we'll handle it from there.
Mayor?
Councilmember Gardner.
So I'd like to bring up an ask. So at our December public safety meeting, we had a presentation from a third-party consultant on restorative justice practices. I've been working on this project for several months with Council Members Hiltz and Council Member Lawson. In that time, we have met with several other cities to hear how their programs are designed. We've met with Fort Collins, Longmont, Manitou Springs, and several others. And in that time, one of the things that we've come back with is there's a lot of different ways that the programs are designed. Every city does it a little differently. Every city has their program sit under different departments, has it funded different ways, has different structures. There's a lot of different options that exist out there. So what I would like to bring forward is a proposal to fund $100,000 to issue an RFP for the development of a restorative justice practices program in Aurora. By way of a little summary, for those who aren't aware what restorative justice is essentially a way to make sure that the victim of crime has a say in the punishment essentially that happens after crime. Typically, when someone commits a crime, it's a violation of law and you go to jail or you get a fine or things like that. But that typically only benefits the state or the government. The victim very rarely has any say in what type of resolution there is for that. So essentially what restorative justice does is brings both the offender and the victim into a room together and they discuss a resolution or a sentence that they think is fair to both sides. It's used very widely in county governments and cities across the US, and Aurora has some diversion type programs, our veterans court, our teen court, but we do not have a full restorative justice program. Talk a little bit about why I would like to hire a consultant and kind of where that idea came from. One of the cities we met with was the city of Inglewood, and their city manager was very helpful in sharing the RFP that they issued. They ended up issuing an RFP to hire a consultant. And they hired a DU professor that's in the process of designing their program. But by having somebody to create that implementation plan, you really do it right. Over the last several months, Councilmembers Hilton, Lawson, and I have met with several staff members, including Zelda Du Bois, Judge Day, Chief Wilson, Julie Heckman, several others. And, you know, while there's a lot of staff is very on board with moving forward with the restorative justice program, we don't have the technical expertise to design it or to implement it. So that's a little bit of kind of what I like to do. So again, the ask is $100,000 to issue an RFP to hire a consultant to design or an implementation plan for restorative justice.
Discussion on the Gardner proposal.
I have a question.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So this is not for those who go to county jail. This is only for municipal court and those that have traffic tickets and municipal offenses?
So the 18th Judicial District and the 17th Judicial District already have restorative justice offices for county offenses. And in fact, the 18th Judicial District is in the process of opening up a restorative justice office here in Aurora. So yes, this would apply to municipal offenses.
Okay, so I guess my question is if it's, I mean, I knew that the 18th Judicial already had a program and they've had it forever. Not the new office, but the program. But if we're doing it for municipal, because we have the wellness court already. So could you tell me the difference in what we're currently doing to not, you know, to help people to maybe do community service or other things besides a direct line to jail? But I out of our municipal court, I don't even know. Those offenses don't typically go that direction. I mean, I know we did with domestic violence.
So I'm not really sure what the question is, other than I can say we don't currently have restorative justice program within Aurora Municipal Court.
Right. And my question is, why would we have a restorative justice for municipal offenses when we have the wellness court? I guess I'm trying to figure out who would it help for what offenses? That's my question.
Well, it's going to vary. It's not going to be for everyone. You know, some of the offenses that we talked about when we talked to the court were things like trespassing, things like vandalism. Those are some of the offenses that tend to happen most often and typically are in that age range of older juveniles, which is a good time typically to you know, intervene in young people's lives before they enter a life of crime. So that's one area that has been a focus. I know a program that I can mention called the Restore program in Fort Collins is specifically targeted at teenage shoplifters, and that's been incredibly successful in not having repeat offenders. So, there's a lot of different offenses that it can be used for. But if, like you said, in our case, it would only be for municipal offenses. Yeah.
Does it make the victim whole? Is it part of it a plan to make the victim whole in terms of compensation?
It is. So that's so for restorative justice to work, both the offender and the victim have to agree on what the outcome is. So one good example would be, let's say a young person commits vandalism at a business. They might get in a room, the business owner and the young person, and agree that the young person's going to come in and clean the store for a couple hours, and the business owner feels like, yes, that makes me whole. And so they bring about a resolution together. Restorative justice does not work if the victim isn't included as part of that conversation. So essentially, the victim is allowed to dictate how that happens. Whereas in the traditional justice system, most often the victim has no say and or very little say in what the ultimate sentence is.
Further discussion?
Just another question.
Mayor Pro Tem.
If Senate Bill 62 passes, would those minor offenses it seems like they wouldn't even be prosecuted? Would they? I mean, I guess I'm trying to see, if they're not going to go to jail anyway.
Well, if I could intervene in this, and that is Senate Bill 62 deals with arrest and pretrial confinement or the ability to post bail, but it does not deal with the sentencing aspects. So in other words,
they don't get prosecuted.
No, they still get prosecuted.
Correct.
They still get prosecuted. Further discussion.
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
I have concerns about this in that we're talking about a six-figure grant that would generate a report that would then generate FTEs. It would generate an entire infrastructure. As far as many of the instances that Councilmember Gardner talked about, as far as shoplifting for teenagers and stuff, that's exactly the purpose of the teen court. So I understand what restorative justice is. I understand what it's trying to accomplish. My concern is that we're going to, we may make in the next few minutes $100,000 decision with absolutely no backup. We don't have any comments from our judicial department. We don't have any comments from staff. We don't have any type of staff package that describes what the staff's position on this and how it fits in with other programs. So based on a 2-minute speech as to why this is important, we're going, we may grant $100,000, which will then lead to many more hundreds of thousands of dollars behind it. I don't think that's appropriate. I think that we should have a more in-depth staff package with the staff recommendation as to whether or not to proceed with this. Otherwise, again, we're going to be creating a new bureaucracy, and we don't know what the judge's position is. We don't know, we don't know what the positions are.
Mayor.
Councilmember Gardner, and then Councilmember Murillo.
So first of all, this has already been presented at the December public safety meeting that Councilmember Gruber was at. So we already talked about this program at that meeting, and he was in attendance, and I'm quite sure probably more than half of council was, because council typically likes to attend public safety meetings. But the other piece of it is, my next thing I was going to say when I was finished was give the opportunity for either Chief Wilson, Dr. Du Bois, and or Judge Day. I know at least Dr. Du Bois and Chief Wilson are on, but wanted to see if they had any feedback or any comments they wanted to make as well, because we've met with them several times throughout this process as well.
Let me just comment first, Mayor. Look, I really think it certainly may have value, but I think it ought to go through the normal process in terms of, advancing the study session, where we can take testimony from the chief of police, from the chief judge, from others, and then come before council for a recorded vote in the establishment of an ongoing, this is going to be an ongoing program. And this is not a one-time expenditure. And so, but further discussion.
Mayor?
Councilmember Johnston.
Wait, Mayor, sorry.
Okay, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Hills.
No, that's okay. I wanted to, I obviously support this. And also, you know, I just pulled up the minutes and Chief Wilson and the juvenile court program assistant and Julie Heckman from the city attorney's office all weighed in, as well as some other people at this committee meeting. And more than half of council was at that meeting. And it was opened up for if there were any questions or feedback, because the intent was to move this forward at that time. And then to my knowledge, that questions had not come forward from Councilmember Gruber specifically, who has these concerns, but was at that meeting. And that was 6 months ago, almost now. So this isn't a new surprise to anyone. That's been, you know, it's not coming at the last minute. It's not something that we're not already aware of and talking about. So I just wanted to share that because I did pull up the minutes just to double check. So thank you.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. It would be great to have had, you know, some of this information in backups, but Councilmember Gardner's proposal, I would say I've had the most information than any of the proposals that have been brought forward today. And then yesterday I saw, you know, a social media post from you that wasn't provided in an email or phone call about some spending freezes and policy ramifications to that. I would say that would need in-depth discussion. So of all the proposals, I've been kept apprised with following what was at the policy committee meeting. You know, council members have been talking that they're working on this. It's just, if we're going to say that, I think across the board, there have been issues with funding requests and policies for today. And this is the one that we've had some background on.
Further discussion?
Mayor? Councilmember Lawson? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Combs.
Oh,
No, it's okay. I can go for.
Okay.
Councilmember Combs, go ahead, and then Councilmember Lawson.
Okay.
Okay. So, you know, this was brought up in a policy committee, but then it hasn't come forward since then to the rest of council. So maybe folks have been talking about that they're doing it, but I think the question becomes talking to whom, because I haven't heard a single thing since the policy committee. So I support this. I think we should do it, but I think it should go to a study session and a council vote, because it is a robust policy proposal that we should have full discussion on. And I do believe we did have a full study session discussion on Councilmember Murillo's proposal that she's bringing forward already. And she was asked to bring that then to this meeting in the study session. So I support this, but I think we should vote on it in a study session, a regular meeting.
Okay. Further discussion?
Mayor?
Councilmember Lawson.
Okay, thank you. So I do support this as well. I know we had a lot of conversations on this as well, but I also see this as kind of a connectivity to the youth violence prevention programming that we're doing. And I know more discussion is needed, but this prison to jail pipeline is really important. If we can have this established within the city, I think it would only enhance that programming and what we're trying to do in those efforts. So I just really want to make that comment and for council to kind of think about those efforts that we're doing on the one end and what this would do to be an additive programming or initiative that we can incorporate as well.
Okay. And just let me say that I'm more than happy to bring my proposal forward that we're going to be talking about later on through that process, because in fact, I think Councilmember Johnston is correct. It would be an ongoing obligation. Further discussion.
Mayor.
Yes.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. I did want to address something that was brought up here, and that's like some potential redundancy with existing programming. And I'm just wondering if part of this study would look into how we can potentially fold some of the existing specialty courts that we have into a broader restorative justice program, or if the intent is to preserve what we already have and then just stand this one up and not try to, I guess, find some kind of efficiencies there.
It's a very good point. Further discussion.
Well, I'd like to respond to that. So
Councilmember Gardner.
I'm not proposing a study. I'm proposing an implementation plan. So I think that's first what I'd like to point out. But secondly, I don't agree that there's redundancies in that. The Veterans Court, Teen Court, Wellness Court, those are examples of diversion, justice diversion tactics, but it is not restorative justice, so it's different. So I don't agree with the premise that there are redundancies. I think that there's probably a misunderstanding or a lack of understanding of what restorative justice is, so there's an assumption made that there's redundancies, but I don't agree with that.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
Mayor Protem.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I'm against this idea. I was not at the December Public Safety Committee. I wasn't on the committee. So I would just like some more background information at a study session.
Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you. Yeah, I support this in theory, but I have no additional information besides an ask today on what we're actually talking about. So I find myself a little confused specifically on what the ask is and how it would work together. So I would like the opportunity to review existing documentation to talk a little bit more about this as well.
Okay. Further discussion. Is there objection to the Gardner proposal? I object. I'm sorry. Councilmember Gardner.
I just wanted to go to study session.
Yeah, likewise, Mayor. Can we ask
Maria,
a question instead?
Okay.
Berzins, I'd like it to go to study session.
Okay.
Like it to go to study session.
Okay. So right now I have Gruber, Kaufman, Murillo, Berzins, Coombs. Anybody else object?
Mayor.
Bergen?
Oh, okay, Bergen. Anybody else?
Mayor.
Marcano.
Well, I just want to say that I support the intent of the program, but study session is fine if that's what the majority of the council's will is.
Very well. Then we'll study session and then obviously proceeding to
Mayor.
a formal vote.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Councilmember
Hiltz. Yeah, my only question is, there's several proposals coming today that have not been through a study session. So if this is the general will of council, perhaps we can just be a little bit more expedient in how we have our conversations about this meeting and offer a blanket statement that if it hasn't been through a study session, then we should just move it to a study session and not belabor the conversation today, since that seems to be the will of the council majority, that's the standard that we're setting, which is fine. I know there's several proposals coming forward. I don't know that all of them have been through a study session discussion. And so perhaps we should do that, especially because, if everyone is vocalizing support for the program, but doesn't want to fund it because of a process issue, then I certainly think that we could just save a lot of time if we were to just do that with any proposal that hasn't been through a formal study session with this particular council.
Well, we'll have the ability to certainly comment on that as the issue come up.
Mayor, I have a question.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. I was just saying, I believe before this might be processed that we've earmarked an amount and then council works through the details, perhaps at a study session. Is that an option to earmark that request, or is the study session to decide?
Well, I think what we're talking about is really formally going through the process. to where, you know, I suspect that maybe legal could opine on this, that it would be in the form of a resolution moving forward, and that there would be a formal vote on it.
And Mayor, you can actually do this by motion, but yes, you can do it formally. The question is today for Greg and for Jim is, do you want them to set $100,000 aside as you're running through sort of the totals of what you're going to have to spend? Formally,
okay.
Yeah, so formally you're going to approve sending this out for an RFP or for going forward with the program. So that is a separate action. It's actually by motion. And then the budget conversation is separate.
Okay, so let's do it this way, because the way Councilmember Gardner presented this was that it was not that it was that the RFP was to say how it was to be done, but then the program would be that would initiate an ongoing program. I think if Councilmember Gardner would sever the two and say that we're setting $100,000 aside to do the RFP to show us how this could be done, that I think that's a one-time issue that I think is appropriate to make a decision on.
Mayor, the ask was for $100,000 to issue an RFP to design and implement a program. So it was not for the ongoing ask. It was for the program.
I don't think you use the term implement. That's different.
An implementation plan.
An implementation plan, okay, but not to implement, because that's to execute.
And the reason why I'd like to do that now is so that way when we're in the process of doing the 2022 budget, we can look for monies to fund the program on an ongoing basis in the 2022 budget. In addition, there's state and federal grant monies that are available. My hope is that the person we hire could look for those monies to help fund our program.
So if I understand this right, that the implementation of the program will still go through the process.
That's right.
What we're doing is we're setting aside $100,000 that could be expended for consultants to help design a program that then could be taken before council, having gone through the process, and then we will vote on it.
That's correct. This is just for the creation of an implementation plan, not for the ongoing ask.
A discussion on Councilmember Gardner's explanation.
Mayor Dave Gruber.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't.
Mayor Coombs,
Councilmember Coombs and Councilmember Gruber.
Councilmember Gardner.
Councilmember Coombs and Councilmember Gruber.
Okay. So I still think I'm fine with doing an earmark. I still think that the proposal for the RFP should come to a study session.
Study session and then to a vote. Okay.
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
Same point is that, this was discussed as a committee. The committee members participated. I think that this needs to come forward. I don't mind earmarking and saying we'll discuss it further, but I still think it's critical that we understand the views of the formal views, not the committee discussions, but the formal views of the staff prior to voting on this. So I'd still like it to come back to study session, and we've already had a vote on it now.
But he's put forward a revised. His initial proposal from Councilmember Gardner was that this was the $100,000 was for the design and implementation of a program that would then be ongoing. But now he's stated that it's merely to set aside $100,000 to do consultants to design a program that will then be taken before council. Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't mind earmarking it so it's set aside, but I don't think we should. What's the point of approving a RFP for a consultant when we don't have the backup material to know what's going to be even decided upon in the RFP for what? So I would prefer we can earmark it and then go to study session and make that decision. That is the point of study session, is to have all that background information.
Mayor.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Mario.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would support earmarking it. I brought up a similar concept with the Immigrant Legal Defense Fund way back when. So I support that. The way that I understand the earmarking, how that would work is we wouldn't be able to expend those funds unless we went through this, additional process to approve that. But this is just to ensure that if we think it's a good idea in the future, actually having something to review, that we could actually, we would have some budget for it. We wouldn't just have used all of the, committed all of our unspent budget at this time. So I would support that, but I still need more information. I was not part of those conversations.
If staff could comment on that, because that's different than my interpretation, but I would certainly agree with Councilmember Mario, but that's not Councilmember Gardner. Councilmember Gardner's, I believe, his understanding is that that if we made the decision today, that staff would be able to expend those monies without any further decision taken by council.
From the budget perspective, I kind of am hearing what you're saying, and we could earmark, we could set some money aside and not budget for it yet until you have your discussion, and then formally budget for it or formally plan on it. I think it's definitely doable if that's the way that you'd want to go.
Councilmember Gardner, are you okay with that?
With earmarking $100,000?
Well, but then holding it essentially is I understand what Greg is saying is that then the money would be held, but pending further action by council.
Yeah, and then I'll work with staff to get it on a study session agenda here in the next couple of weeks.
Very well. Okay. Further discussion. Is there objection to the, I would say, the revised Gardner proposal? Seeing none, then that will go forward. Greg, what do we got? I'm sorry, Councilmember Mario.
Thank you. I have a couple of budget asks. So I'll just start off probably with the one that I've spoken about the most. It's related to supporting our Asian American Pacific Islander community. It's a really small dollar ask. I'm asking for $7,000, but essentially it would go towards creating a project or partnership between the Asian Pacific Development Center as well with the Aurora Police Department. And that was a request made directly from the community on what they're needing in this time. So it would go to fund essentially overtime and some other one-time costs for setting up these self-defense training classes, as well as an accompanying set of safety alarm kits to be able to give to participants and just general community members. So I'll start there since it's probably the more familiar and lowest dollar ask I have.
I'm sorry, what is the dollar? What is the dollar?
I said it was 7,000.
Okay, 7,000. Okay, 7,000.
And that's one time?
Mm-hmm.
And 7,000 one time this year?
That is a great question, Greg. Wherever it is most appropriate, I kind of would defer to you on that.
Okay, so if there's not an immediate need, so if it needs to be done in 2021, we would make it happen in 2021. If there's not that immediate need, then any discussion should probably be done as part of the 2022 budget.
No, it needs to be done this year.
Okay.
That's a current active ask for folks in the midst of the coronavirus, even though feels like we're on our way out of it.
Great.
I'm sorry, Councilman Mario, could you, so it is an immediate need. Could you explain it a little bit again, what this is?
Sure. So I sent over a kind of rough proposal from Claudine McDonald, who is the Chief Community Relationship Officer with APD last night. And essentially it is, trying to allocate costs for let's see, diversity, equity, and inclusion training for folks who are going to participate in this. I think it's facilitated through the Asian Chamber of Commerce. And so they would do a training with the police officers. So there's some costs there. Self-defense class instruction. So essentially it would be paying for overtime for our police officers at different levels to be able to offer classes. So there's it written in the proposal, 4 classes per month. And one of them, we wanted to support the development of our youth. So we were going to try and see if we could target middle school and high schoolers to do something to participate in this, a woman-only class, a class for seniors, and then just the community in general. So it's very, I guess, specific and defined to working with APDC, since that's a need that they have received over and over again from community members. Is that enough clarity, Mayor?
Further discussion? Is there any objection?
Mayor Digger.
Councilmember Gruber.
Yeah, I'm working this. Let me check one thing. I first thought we were talking about the supporting the Third Cultures program for Asian Americans. If we're talking beyond that, especially if we're talking about the fact that we're going to mandate that our police officers attend training that's given by a civilian organization outside of the city, we've just provided that training through the city. I'm just concerned about the impact of having all of our police officers. Maybe I don't understand it. If we're supporting the program that was originally designed, and that was for packages to support Asian Americans or processes for Asian Americans to protect themselves, and it was a small number, that's something I can support. But if we're talking about forcing our officers to go to a training by an outside organization that's not vetted by the city, I do have a problem with that. So maybe I could get some more details on that.
Mayor Chief Wilson.
Yeah, Chief Wilson, please.
Thank you, sir. And Councilmember Gruber, I hear your question. So I am absolutely 100% behind helping out with this initiative on Councilmember Murillo's. The DEI training that we did, it was very it was focusing mostly on the African American community, but we're going to continue, obviously, with Claudine McDonald being a DEI trainer. So I trust her opinion that this would be a good training to have. And it's just going to go over the historical traumas that we have with some of our immigrant refugee API community on their interactions with police from their own countries, and just barriers that would keep them from wanting to report crime. So we're probably, I'm committed to doing this regardless of what you all decide today and helping out with the AAPI community. But I just wanted to just put my support behind this 100%.
Further discussion?
I can follow up on that.
Councilmember Gruber.
So I understand what you're saying, Chief. In my military career, I spent most of my overseas time in the Western Pacific, and I'm very familiar with many of the countries that I've served in and what they go through as far as police are concerned. So I guess what I'm saying is that any training provided to our police officers will be vetted by the police department and by you and Claudine prior to our police officers receiving it. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, sir. Yes.
So this is going to augment the training that's already provided. It's not going to allow. I'm just concerned about forcing our police to take training that hadn't been vetted by the police department.
Yes, sir. It'll be vetted, and I have going to continue to bring DEI training from all different aspects of the community to the department. So this is just aligned with what I'm doing anyway.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Councilmember.
Thank you. I thought that was that connection that I've been working in conjunction with our department was clear, given that the proposal was developed by Claudine McDonald. So if there were any questions related to that, I guess I thought they were answered just through the actual proposal and the fact that they're the ones who help support this proposal being developed. And then to address the safety alarm kits, that's part of this. So I've talked about both. They were kind of developing at the same time. And so it felt kind of like a natural evolution to combine both of them, since they, the safety alarm kits from Third Culture, as well as the self-defense classes, they were both targeting a similar demographic. So it made sense to combine them.
Further discussion? Is there objection? Any objections? Seeing none, the Murillo proposal will move forward.
Mayor, I have a couple more.
Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you. And thank you for your support. I'm going to share that tonight, and hopefully that'll be really well received. I have a couple of other requests, and I'm hoping Jim or Cindy, if you would be kind enough to pull up the conversation around the Revitalizing Main Streets grant. That, I guess I'll start with that. And
Sounds
while
good.
that's yeah, I guess just to tee it up just a little bit is we've been having conversations, ongoing conversations. We called it the Northwest Aurora Forum, and it's businesses, nonprofits, and residents that have been participating in ongoing discussions with myself and city staff per Jim's direction. So it's top-down support and basically talking through pain points of doing business, living in the area, and kind of coordinating efforts. And so we've done a lot to, I guess, begin some implementation of some of the recommendations developed in those conversations, kind of the low-level stuff that is already programmed into city operations, like installing fences, around our city-owned parking lots type things. So some beautification, some safety, mostly safety initiatives. And this $400,000 request is to leverage a $2 million revitalizing grant that would help us continue with some of those initiatives. And I will be quiet and see if Cindy can jump in at this.
Sure, absolutely. Katie, could you allow me to share my screen?
Yes, one moment.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna pull up a map. So just about a week or two ago, CDOT has come out with a new Revitalizing Main Street, also known as the Large Safety Infrastructure Grant. Let me see if I can do this. Hang on. I better not multitask. I will not. Can you all see my screen? No.
No.
Sorry. Just there we go. All right. How's that? Y'all have a picture up there now? Great. Okay, so this grant is about revitalizing Main Street. And DRCOG has been collecting data over the past few years about areas where there are serious injuries or fatalities related to bicycle and pedestrian modes. So I'm gonna zoom in on this a little bit here and talk you through it. So as Councilmember Murillo said, it's a $2 million grant. They would like a 20% match on that. And what you'll see on this screen is the dots. And what these dots represent is either a bicycle or pedestrian injury or fatality. So our traffic department has gone through just a first blush and come up with some locations, specifically in Northwest Aurora, where we really have more of a heat map, I'll call it, of injuries and fatalities around bikes and pedestrians. And so our proposal would be to pursue this grant with the $400,000 match. And then we would look at not only improving some of the intersections in this area where we have a problem by either doing pedestrian improvements, but also improving the lighting in the area as well. So The good thing about this area is it checks a lot of the boxes on the grant opportunity. It is very much around bicycle and pedestrian safety, lighting, and improving those conditions. So that's the proposal in a nutshell.
A further discussion?
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
Again, this is the first I've heard about it. $400,000 are in the six figures again. I'm a little bit concerned that it's all focused on one ward. I know that there are pedestrian accidents throughout the city. How come, well, I'll let the other ward members speak, but I'm just kind of surprised that, well, I'll let the other ward members speak. I don't know whether they were asked whether their ward could compete for this as well.
Yeah,
Mayor, before, can I interject?
Councilmember Mario.
Thank you. I think it's a little frustrating to hear that we would try to pit ward members against others. I've supported, Francoise when she wanted to bring a recreation center to her district, and regardless of the impact it had on my constituents, because I do think that there is value in revitalizing and supporting different parts of the city. We are all one city, regardless of political boundaries. So I take offense to that characterization that this is somehow competing with resources from other groups. I'm sure if a council member from a ward wants to put in the work to convene a collaboration between businesses, nonprofits, and residents, and start talking through resolutions of how to support that the city would welcome that conversation and find some areas to support those efforts. So I don't want this to be a tit for tat. I think that's kind of an embarrassing conversation, especially for an at-large council member to try to convene. It doesn't make any sense. We can simultaneously support one ward because it has unique needs and support other wards for their different needs as well. So I am frustrated to hear that we would try to characterize a conversation in that way.
Mayor, further discussion. Councilmember.
Which?
Councilmember Gruber.
So I guess that was a mischaracterization of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that apparently there's a multi-million-dollar grant that's been made available by the state under the Colorado Department of Transportation that's been made available to the city of Aurora. I had not heard of it before, and I suspect that many others on council had not heard of it before. If it had been handled, made available to the entire council, this discussion would occur throughout the city. As a result of only one council, well, I don't know how many other council members heard about it, but as a result of that, we're only seeing results in one city. When I was on the transportation committee, we would look at citywide projects and we would determine which area, for example, on road maintenance, where the emergencies were. We'd show an entire city map. We'd prioritize assets against wherever the need was across the entire city. My point here was that, again, a multi-million-dollar grant that is not being levied across the entire city. I don't understand why that was.
Cindy, could you respond to that?
Yeah, so this area was selected because of the DRCOG data that is behind the information presented on the map. This really is a hotspot for the city overall. And I would also mention this grant opportunity has just come out. It's brand new. And so we were just taking a chance to hop on it and see if we could get support to potentially address some of those issues. So
okay, so they went real quick, but when I was on DRCOG, in past years, we would bring all of these to the city. The DRCOG, that was Bob Roth was primary, I was secondary. But anytime DRCOG had something like this for the city, it would be brought to the city and then through the transportation committee, in this case, would discuss it. I'm just not aware that this was discussed with anybody else in the city.
And it is a CDOT grant, actually, so it came out through CDOT. So just clarifying.
Mayor, can I respond as the DRCOG representative, please? Thank you. So yes, again, this is brand new. When we did hear about it at DRCOG, I did discuss with Matt Callison that we should look into places in the city where we can get this. I think this A is part of the existing DRCOG data. B is an area that has had an ongoing process happening that dovetailed really well to be quickly proposed for this grant. This being proposed for this area doesn't mean that we can't make other asks of CDOT for this grant. We don't just get only one ask on this grant. We can make multiple asks. So this, again, was an ongoing conversation and it happened to coincide. So that's how you end up with very quickly, as soon as the grant comes out, a proposal like this available. But I mentioned some other areas in Ward 5 and I asked MAC if we can look at in general throughout the city places that would be appropriate to apply for this grant. So I don't see this as a exclusive to Ward 1. That's the only chance we're going to get to apply for the Revitalizing Main Streets grant. We have time to look at other areas as well.
Mayor?
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Coombs, for giving that DRCOG perspective. And I think it's okay that, Councilmember Gruber is asking those questions. I just want to say, as the bordering council member to this area, I absolutely support. We know that when we look at heat maps and other issues, and also, the potential with an economic hub and the opportunities of Ward 1, that it really has a regional impact to no borders with wards. So I see that all of the bordering, the nearby wards will benefit from this. Anytime where we have, obviously staff has been involved, Jim has been involved, Cindy, thank you for all of that. It's been with DRCOG. So I feel like this isn't something that just came up, that there's been those discussions. But anytime that there's a chance where we're putting in the $400,000 for a $2.5 million leveraging more funds, it just seems like a easy yes because of that return. So with all of those issues, I definitely support. But I just also want to say, I think it's okay for our at-large to also say, hey, what do the other council members think of this? But I think, we've answered those today and definitely will be supporting those.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, and I think it's a great opportunity to leverage against the $2 million grant. My question is, because, it was mentioned it was per Jim's direction. So I'm just trying to understand, where did the grant come from? It's from the Department of Transportation and CDOT? Is that correct?
It's from CDOT, yes.
CDOT. So is the 2 million, so if we put the 400,000 in, do we get to the whole 2 million?
That's our plan. Yes, we would ask for the full grant with the 400,000, and how we would strategize this, because this is a super quick turnaround. It's due May 14th, and it just came out. And what our thought is similar to the DRCOG grant that we got, which is for critical sidewalk gaps. We just provided the general locations where we were looking at and told CDOT, we're going to hone in on these by some established criteria and get as much done as we can. So we would do a similar approach here.
Okay, so if there happened to be, let's say in Ward 5 or 4, a very problematic intersection with pedestrians and bikes, possibly that would be addressed in this with this grant?
It could be, but
I understand the majority would be Northwest.
Yeah, from the staff perspective and all the DRCOG data, this really is the area that's of most concern. But
okay, and would this be an ongoing grant that they'll do every year? No.
Well, I guess I can't say that for sure. This is the first time we've had this type of grant, so I don't know if they have plans to keep doing this in future years. We don't know that yet.
All right, thank you.
But it would require another application, obviously, for.
Yes.
Okay. Further discussion?
Burzins?
Councilmember Burzins.
Thank you. Ward 3 butts right up against Ward 1, and I just want Councilmember Maria to know that I do not feel pitted against Ward 1. I have no animosity, it's fine. I do know that it's very dense in Ward 1, and I've been on transportation for several years and chair of the committee also. So I know when you do have a quick turnaround, you have to act, and I'm fine with this. Don't be frustrated. I'm certainly not frustrated. I would like to ask though, didn't we just vote that with this as an exception, that things that we haven't heard before should go to study session? I mean, we've spent like 30 minutes sitting here hashing this out, when if it wasn't a quick turnaround, we shouldn't have been doing that. It should have been going to study session. Isn't that correct?
We would have brought this to transportation committee if the timing was correct, but it literally came out right around the same time that the agenda would have come out. So that's why it's coming here, just because it is such a quick turnaround, and it only came out a week or so ago. So
no, I understand that. That this is an exception to what we just decided, that if we haven't heard it and don't have the backup, it needs to go to study session.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember Mario.
Thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Burzins. I agree. No animosity between wards. I just didn't appreciate that it was it felt like a prompt for dissent. And anyone who's watched these meetings knows how this goes. So I didn't want to get between this, ward council. We are not productive as a council when we are arguing my intersection is more important than your intersection. And that's what I was trying to avoid. So,
and I just don't want us to make it personal.
Yeah. And I think I'm being very clear that there is some precedent for my concern and me wanting to avoid that. The public doesn't need to hear that necessarily. So I think in summary, I think it is very fiscally strategic for us to leverage $400,000 to gain a $2 million investment in our road infrastructure, in creating a more safe area for our pedestrians to cross. I think it's a little alarming to see so many injuries and even fatalities in Ward 1 related to the type of grant, and that this could potentially be really beneficial. So I hope that I can gain y'all's support. And in lieu of any backup, I had planned on this presentation during this meeting as well. So just wanted to make that clear.
Further discussion. Seeing none, is there
quick?
Oh, Councilmember Gruber.
So I need to understand then, so the $400,000 that we're talking about is going to pay for the intersections and the matching grant for the Colorado Department of Transportation. It's going to pay for the kits from the third world culture, the mochi making company, very good mochi making company on Colfax, and it's going to pay for diversity training for our officers. Is the $400,000 going to apply for that, or is it $400,000 matching plus additional money for those other things?
Additional. It's two separate proposals, Councilmember Gruber. Am I correct, Councilmember Mario?
You are correct. The nature and the focus of the grant is on infrastructure. I don't believe that safety in that self-defense training or safety alarm kits would qualify. And $7,000, we've already voted on that, but $7,000 is such a small amount that I hope that it's appropriate that they're separate asks.
Further discussion. Seeing none, is there objection to appropriating $400,000 as to match the state grant? Objection? Seeing none, then that's the direction.
Mayor, I had two other items. Can I make a quick comment?
Please proceed.
Yeah, so in my email, I had also requested monies for a power washer as well as additional overtime for police foot patrol, kind of given the direction of the conversation and some comments made about a potential study session conversation. I won't be making those asks and will defer to the preferred process there. So just wanted to wrap that up since there were 2 other items in that email. Thank you.
Further discussion, further proposals.
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. So I have 2 things I'd like to discuss with council here. And, we will, of course, prepare things and bring this to study at a later date. But the first is actually an infrastructure ask for a portion of Ward 4. And that is to allocate funding to complete the sidewalks along Peoria and Yale near the intersection and then heading down into the point. The reason for that is I've gotten a lot of constituent outreach from that area with concerns about aging population, accessibility issues, and the amount of new housing that's going to be coming online at the point, and the proximity of this area to Polton Elementary as well. So they'd like to see us direct funding to actually get those streets completed. I know that we have a Dr. Cog grant that will, I think, be executing on in 2022 and 2023, but that is pretty limited in funding, and it's not a guarantee that this area will necessarily get addressed. So I did want to bring, I guess, an ask to earmark 480 to see if we're able to complete at least a portion of the overall area that folks are reaching out about.
How did you arrive at that number?
Conversations with staff and also one of the communities, their HOA is actually reaching out to private contractors to get estimates as well.
Cindy, could you comment on the number?
Yes, actually, we had seen that number from the outside consultant, and it actually is very close to the number that we had developed as well. So,
very well. Okay, further discussion.
All right.
Mayor, Councilmember.
Councilmember Hills.
I don't have any concerns about this proposal, but I wanted to make sure that we circle back to Councilmember Murillo's proposals because we weren't able to talk about those.
Oh.
That's all.
I'm sorry, she was
nothing on this present one.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, Mayor.
Yeah, Councilmember McConnell.
My apologies. I thought that we had settled on.
We did.
Okay, Councilmember Murillo.
I mean, it went quickly in like 3 seconds. So by the time I hit unmute, you had already started speaking. So I would just like the opportunity to go back to that one.
Okay, I apologize. Go ahead, Councilmember.
No, you can finish. I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't have any questions on this one, so thank you.
All right, great. And I do have one more. So the next one.
Okay, let's go ahead and decide on the first one.
Oh, sorry.
$480,000 for developing sidewalks. So could you summarize the proposal again?
Yeah, so it'd be earmarking 480,000 and bringing an item to study to complete the sidewalks along South Yale. Specifically, I think this is what this amount will cover, connecting the dams down to the point and the existing sidewalk that ends basically right where the dams begin.
But it is doing the actual construction?
Yes, that's design. It's design and construction.
Design and construction. Okay, further discussion.
Berzins.
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. Could any of what, I mean, the city has a lot of needs, obviously, but could any of these projects be a part of the new infrastructure bill? I mean, we don't know exactly what it is yet, but we know that we should be getting quite a bit of money for it. So should we kind of wait on those sort of things? Or I guess you wanted to earmark it, but I hate to see it come out of maybe the general fund or transportation needs or whatever, when we know we're going to get a chunk of money for these transportation needs, infrastructure needs. So I'm real hesitant to do one knowing that something else is coming.
Sure. Mayor, may I respond?
Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you. I think that's actually a great point, Councilmember Berzins. I would like to just go ahead and discuss the specific project and still earmark the monies. In terms of how we fund it, we can, keep a close eye on what happens with the federal infrastructure bill. If it passes and that makes money available to us, awesome. If not, I'd still like to move forward using some of our excess, for this one-time ask.
Further, Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah, so I'm okay with setting aside the money for now, knowing that we can have more conversation, not only about the infrastructure bill, but you did mention the Safer Main Streets grant from DRCOG. And I think I was confusing the CDOT Revitalizing Main Streets with the DRCOG Safer Main Streets grant, which is one that we can that we can use to help make safety improvements, which I think sidewalks absolutely qualify for in upcoming DRCOG grants. So as much as, yes, it takes more time to get those, I do think looking at leveraging those dollars is of value. So I think set aside the money so we can figure out how we're going to move forward, but I do want to try to leverage any other money that is available.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there objection to the Marcano proposal to appropriate $480,000 to sidewalk construction? Seeing none, then that will move forward. Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you, sir. And my second ask is a little unorthodox, but this is one where we potentially will make money off of this in the long run. And since we have more time, I was not going to bring it forward today initially, but since we have more time to discuss this and provide more backup for everybody, y'all know that I have been looking into public banking for the city of Aurora and the feasibility for a public bank model here. We did finally hear back from the Banking Commission with an affirmative response that the city of Aurora would be able to apply for a banking charter to stand up a Tabor enterprise. And that's important because we don't want to actually have direct oversight or liability for any kind of, banking enterprise. And that we're able to do it, basically. We just need to meet a very clear set of requirements, which Commissioner Bolt sent over to us. So my ask, after speaking with staff and also speaking with the Rocky Mountain Public Banking Institute, who has done a lot of work in this area, is for an earmark of $150,000 to put together basically a study that would go down and identify how we meet all of the hurdles, or not really hurdles, but the qualifications in Colorado Revised Statutes for the incorporation of a public bank, and more importantly, to see if we can actually construct a feasible business model for this enterprise that will not work in opposition to or in competition with our existing local public banks and credit unions, but will actually function as a bolstering element to increase their lending power, and then to allow us to refinance bonds at much more favorable rates. I think that's kind of relevant to a discussion we're going to have in a little bit here, where we're looking at $43 million of deferred maintenance becoming $72 million over 30 years if we go the route of general obligation bonds, and also providing a new revenue stream for the city without having to raise taxes. So I think there's a lot of public benefit here, and I just want to make sure that we can appropriate some money to have experts look into this and provide us with a workable business model so that we can discuss that and get a lot of other questions that y'all might have answered as well.
Further discussion?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
I would prefer this one go through the process of committees and then study session, just because there's just so much to it to really delve into and comprehend.
And I agree. Further discussion?
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
I think it's important to point out that this has come up, I think, twice now at the Management and Finance Committee, and in both times there were significant problems identified. What we're essentially talking about is creating a taxpayer-based bank that would be used to provide low-interest loans to high-risk people, and to say that it's going to generate revenue. Again, when you're lending money to high-risk folks, that is not a good, you have to consider the probability that the money is not going to be paid back. This needs a lot more discussion, and allocating any money now, I think, would be inappropriate. It has to come back. I would recommend strongly that it come back to study session for a full debate.
Mayor.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Councilmember Gerber, those are incorrect assumptions as to the business model and intent of the bank. The intent is to function much like the Bank of North Dakota, to be a banker's bank, to not provide direct loans or checking or savings or any of that kind of activity to uncreditworthy folks, but to bolster the ability of our existing community banks to lend out and invest in our city. I don't want an enterprise to take on that kind of risk, as especially, maybe if the enterprise is profitable over the long term, that might be something that the board of directors for that enterprise might entertain, but that's not how I think it should be structured initially. But again, this is all very premature because we need to actually identify the feasibility of a business model, the bylaws, and a whole lot more before we even get into these details. And that's the purpose of the study.
Okay, and I certainly would like to see this move through the process, and because sidewalks we understand, traffic safety we understand, but something is novel as a government-run bank is a little different, and so
Mayor,
I think we need a full discussion on it before we appropriate monies. Councilmember Bucano.
Thank you, sir. This is actually not novel. This idea is 300 years old. Just because we haven't really done it much here in the United States doesn't make it new. It just means that we're kind of really behind the ball on this one, honestly. We do have some publicly owned banks here in the U.S. Germany, I think, is a really great model to look at. They've been doing this, like I said, for I think 250 to 300 years. They have various models, and the model that I'm looking at, like I said, is not a consumer bank. It is a banker's bank. And it's a lot more small c conservative in how it operates. And again, I'll just say that the most comparable thing we can look at here is the Bank of North Dakota. And just so you know, the metropolitan service area for the city of Aurora and Denver and Lakewood has comparable economic activity to the entire state of North Dakota. So I think that there's probably a strong business case to be made, and I think that's part of what I want to actually charter the study for, is to determine that we can actually make it work.
Further discussion.
Yes.
Member Bergen.
Yeah, and as far as I know, that the bank or the one in North Dakota is the only one in the entire United States that is functioning, and that it's been tried in major cities. I believe even San Francisco dropped the idea because it was so risky. So you may have a different model. I just think it needs to come to study session just for further depth discussion.
Sure.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you. There are several small public banks. I don't have them all on the top of my head, but another good example I can give you is actually the Chickasaw Nations Bank in Oklahoma. They began with $7 million of initial capitalization. Today they have over $200 billion, I think, dollars in assets. Sorry, $7 million, and they have 200 million today, if I'm not mistaken. And they're about 13 years old. So there are other examples that we can point to a little more local. Alberta, the Canadian province, has a public bank that's been in existence for decades as well, and is also solvent, has done a lot of good. I hear you about discussing this in more detail at policy committee, but the reason I'm asking for a set aside for this or an earmark for this is because there are a lot of questions that I might not be able to answer myself, but an expert in this field will be able to answer for us.
Mayor.
That makes sense. I can always bring in the Rocky Mountain Public Banking Institute if you like to discuss this with you in more detail as well. But I think hiring someone to actually really investigate that and the feasibility would address honestly all of our concerns.
Yeah, I mean I guess my concern on hiring someone is that I want to make sure that we get both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Not just an advocate for it, but I don't know if that would be staff or if that would be an outside expert just to look at making sure that we understand the risks that are involved. Maybe there are no risks, but I just want a full picture.
Why don't we do, Councilmember McConnell, this kind of gets us back into the discussion we had earlier with Councilmember Gardner, in that why don't we make a decision on, I guess you would call it a set aside for the money, but the money would not be spent unless council affirmatively voted in favor of establishing a public bank.
And that is precisely what I'm asking for, Mayor.
Well, that wasn't clear. Councilmember Gardner.
So there's a couple of issues that I see with something like this, and I'm hesitant to even commit to spending any staff time or council time on doing it before these questions are answered. One is state law in North Dakota is different than state law in Colorado. In North Dakota, you can get private deposit insurance. However, Colorado law does not allow private deposit insurance. So you have to be either insured through Federal Deposit Insurance Corp. if you're a bank, or National Credit Administration if you're a credit union. Colorado state law, from my read, would have to be changed to allow a similar structure as to what happens in North Dakota. Part of how North Dakota addresses the topic of deposit insurance is the taxpayers of the state are on the hook for guaranteeing the deposits. And I have concerns with putting our taxpayers on the hook for guaranteeing that. Like I said, too, I don't know that I think state law would allow that type of structure because, like I said, banks, even corporate banks, I'm very familiar with what a banker's bank is, are still required to maintain deposit insurance for any deposits, and Colorado state law, like I said, requires either FDIC or NCUA share insurance. My other concern is how the bank would be capitalized. That's going to be a significant hurdle. So what that process means, or what that means, is the bank has to have capital, has to have money to begin to operate. And from where I'm sitting and the budget presentation that I've heard, I'm not sure that the funds are ready and available to capitalize a bank that we don't know we can even operate. So, I guess to me, I'm not sure this is the appropriate time to move forward with a proposal like this because I'm not sure that state law really would allow it.
Mayor.
Further discussion, Councilmember Moicano.
Thank you. So I can address some of those questions, Councilmember Gardner, and I think they were also addressed in the memo from Commissioner Bolt. So yes, any municipally, chartered public banking enterprise would need to seek FDIC insurance, whether or not they were going to be a retail bank. That was included in the package that they sent over for us about de novo banking. That amount, from what I have discussed with, again, public banking experts, would be in the low six figures. I think it was like less than $150,000 in insurance to cover. And again, that would not fall on the city of Aurora, that would fall on the enterprise itself. The capitalization strategy for the enterprise is part of what the study includes. We would need help determining that. Again, the public banking folks that I've been speaking with seem to think they could do that by issuing revenue bonds as an enterprise for initial capitalization. And then since they are a bank, they'd be able to lend 10 times the amount of the capital, or up to 10 times the amount that they would get off of those bonds to start the business. But again, I'm not a banking expert. I've just been talking to folks who are, and part of the reason that I want to charter the study is to get folks who are also banking experts, but not necessarily public banking advocates, to look into this as well. It is to get the other side, I guess, as Councilmember Bergen asked.
Mayor.
I'm sorry, who?
Gardner.
Councilmember Gardner.
So there's two primary ways that a financial institution can make loans. Credit unions typically make loans out of shares they have on deposit, whereas banks leverage their assets. So from what I'm hearing, the proposal would not be to make loans against deposits. It would be to make loans against assets of the city. And to me, that's a pretty risky proposition if we're going to take city assets and leverage those to make loans to facilitate the construction of other assets. That gets to be pretty risky very quickly.
Mayor. Yeah, I just want to clarify again that the city is not involved in that portion. We would be involved in chartering it as an enterprise, and then the enterprise would be the one issuing these things, not the city. I want to insulate the city as much as possible from any risk whatsoever. And that's, again, part of what the study would be looking into. So this is kind of my frustration with the conversation we're having right now, is that there are a lot of questions, and that's what the study would address. But we're using the questions as a barrier to, even setting aside the money potentially for the study. So it's a catch-22. And this is a proposition that stands to potentially make the city some money and to help us with a lot of other public needs that we're going to be discussing a little later. So again, going back to the mayor's earlier summary, my ask is to set aside 150 so we can discuss this, and then if we approve that, move forward with issuing a study.
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
Many of these points were discussed at management and finance, and it was found to be very risky. But going back to the fundamental point, the philosophical point, is it right for the city of Aurora to use taxpayer money to generate a bank and provide banking service? In other words, this would create a new arm of the government. Granted, it would be an enterprise, but it would be insured by the government, and it would be using taxpayer funds to grant that. The idea of saying that you could take out, you could provide a loan 10 times higher than your assets. And again, the loan's not going directly to the person taking the risk, or to the person who needs the loan, but the loans are going to be targeted to banks who will be encouraged to use those loans to support high-risk people with low-interest loans, all backed by the city, and that enterprise is going to be backed and chartered by the city. Philosophically, this is not something the city of Aurora should be involved in. This is something that I just don't think we should create a new branch of government within the city of Aurora. I recommend we don't pursue this. That was the findings of the experts at the Management and Finance Committee, and I recommend that we do not earmark money for this.
Further discussion. Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you. So Councilmember Gerber, I will once again ask you to stop making assumptions about what the bank is going to do and what the private sector, frankly, will do with the ability to, extend more credit into our community and to help basically investments in Aurora. Second, the committee did not find any kind of strong opposition. To the best of my recollection, is that we didn't have enough information to move forward because we were waiting to hear from the State Banking Commission, which we now have, which is why I'm bringing this back. Third, again, this is not putting taxpayer money at risk. I don't know what that business model will look like, but the one that has been discussed to me, because I have raised this concern with the public banking folks that I've been speaking with for over a year on this issue, is that we don't want to put any taxpayer money at risk here. So that's why Tabor enterprises are able to issue revenue bonds, and that would be a means to capitalize the bank. Again, I want another, independent look at this, hence the ask for the study. So, and your ideological opposition is noted, but frankly is irrelevant. Thank you.
Okay, this is a major policy question in my view that deserves a lot more attention. So if I understand Councilmember McConnell's motion as discussed, is that it will merely be a set aside
Yes.
for the $150,000 to study the feasibility of public banking. However, that will be contingent upon going through the process and a formal vote on whether or not to move forward.
Yes,
Am I
yes,
correct
Mayor.
in that?
Yes,
Okay.
Mayor. I will bring in the public banking folks that I've been working with to give you the lay of the land, basically, and why the study is important,
Right.
and then ask that we move that forward.
But you will formally move it forward with a resolution, correct?
That would be through a resolution to put out a request for proposal to,
Correct.
identify someone who's
So there
qualified
will
to do this work.
There will be a formal vote.
Correct.
All right, and study session prior to the vote.
Correct.
Okay, is there further discussion?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because Councilmember Marcano mentioned having that presentation by, I can't remember the name of the organization, but
Rocky Mountain Public
I
Banking
just,
Institute.
yeah, that I just want to make sure that we also have, the other side perspective on risk.
Okay.
Mayor?
Any objection to having both sides presented?
Mayor, I object to the set aside of the funds.
Okay.
Mayor, I just have a comment, Johnston.
Councilmember Johnston.
So I just want to, because we've been talking about set asides and not set asides and study sessions and all of this, and I was going to bring it up during the discussion with the foot patrol, but we didn't have that today. Is some of this, you know, Greg gave this whole overview of our budget, and we have another discussion in the fall. You know, some of these asks, I just want to show if it's like, oh, it's a little inconsistent of sometimes supporting a set aside and sometimes not, is for me, I look at how fleshed out this is and ready to go for a set aside. And the other, given our budget outlooks, is I don't feel as comfortable and feel like we can still have some of these robust discussions, but earmark or allocate based on the September workshops. So I just want to bring that up too, since we have a couple of times a year where we have these discussions.
Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I concur with Councilmember Johnston.
Further discussion? Okay. Councilmember McConnell.
Sorry, I think that we were all discussing, or Councilmember Johnson, if I'm understanding you correctly, we are discussing the same kind of thing that we did earlier in terms of, we'll, you know, set the money aside, have that conversation, and then if there's not agreement, then the money basically is released, right? Or no longer set aside, if that makes sense, right?
I think that's what your proposal is.
Okay, I thought that's what you were saying. Okay, well, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that I'm not a blanket set aside for all programs from this budget.
Okay, further discussion?
Yeah, Mayor.
Councilmember Hiltz.
I'm just gonna say Hiltz at the beginning now. I don't support the set aside on this. I do think we need to have the conversation about if this is a program we want to pursue before we have a discussion about how we would overcome the legal challenges for it. So the way that I see the two things is that they're different, because with restorative justice, we know that's a program that we all support. Everyone's on record saying they support, you know, that, or most people are on record supporting that type of program. It's just a matter of the implementation details, where I think with this one, there's not enough information and there hasn't been a majority consensus that this is something that we want to do as a city. So it's a bit preemptive to pay for a study to do an implementation plan and overcoming legal challenges on something we haven't decided that as a city we want to do as a program. I'm open to it. This is the first, I haven't gotten any information on this. I know that Councilmember Murillo sent out some great information on her proposals. And I do want to revisit the truck proposal and talking about doing that more quickly, because I do think that's a good proposal from her, but just so that doesn't get lost in the timeline here. But I do see them as different. And until we have that conversation about if we want to do this as a city, we shouldn't be setting aside money to do that implementation study that you're looking to do. I'm open to it. I don't know enough about it. So that, you know.
Okay, very well. Further discussion? Seeing none.
Murillo.
Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you. I think I will also start with my last name, since I think I get mixed up with Councilmember Hiltz and others. No, I mean, I am supportive of earmarking monies and then going through a more robust process. It feels like a chicken and the egg situation. We have questions, but we need to study it to answer the questions. So I would love to get into that into more detail. But yeah, so I'm comfortable with earmarking it in preparation for a future conversation.
Further discussion?
Berzins?
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. Why do we feel like we need to earmark? We know we have money to spend should we decide, but is it necessary? Can I ask Greg? I mean, do we have to tell you to hold 150,000 off to the side, or 100 here or 200 here? Can't we just do it when it comes up? I mean, we're spending all this time talking about earmarking money for possibly something in the future. Is that even necessary?
I think that the discussion, I mean, we'll have to have that discussion at some point. I think that I actually agree with the statement that I heard earlier, that there's lots of different times to actually have this discussion. This is not the only bite at the apple today. There's lots of other time to go through with this. And I guess that an earmark to me just means I'm going to set it aside for a little while, and then if it doesn't happen, then we're going to go put it back to funds available or something like that. I'm writing it down, but I guess I sort of agree that this. I'm hearing the discussion, and the discussion makes a lot of sense. And if it's an earmark, that's almost like a pre-priority. But
I just feel like we're spinning our wheels.
Okay.
Maybe we'll use it, maybe we won't. You know, it's just we have a lot still left on the agenda.
Mayor?
Further discussion.
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I mean, on this one, I don't think we should earmark it. Maybe in the fall, it would make more sense. But if we do earmark, you are taking money and putting it aside, and it is taking away from something that might be critical to have done right away. So it is kind of taking it away in the budget.
Further discussion. Seeing none, then the question before us is whether or not to move forward with setting aside $150,000 for a study on the feasibility of public banking for the city of Aurora, pending formal approval by the city council. Is there opposition?
Mayor Gruber, object.
Okay, Councilmember Gruber.
Gardner, object.
Gardner.
Bergen.
Bergen. The mayor objects. Berzins.
Yeah.
Further objection. Seeing.
Are we talking about the?
Are we talking about objection or what?
Objection.
I object.
Set aside, yeah, helps.
Larson.
I object to the set aside.
Okay, motion, the proposal fails. Further proposal.
Mayor, I know I've been speaking a lot, but I wanted to go back to Councilmember Hiltz's request to revisit the earlier conversation. Been made aware that she stepped aside to tend to her baby, and we had already moved on. So I think we should be mindful of that. Maybe taking a little pause before we switch items. So can we revisit that?
Councilmember Hiltz.
Yeah, thank you. I had him literally for 3 minutes. I leaned over and I came back up to unmute and it was done. She had sent out a proposal to us, and there was the one for the policing and then one for the dedicated truck. So I want to separate those out. Because on the policing, I would like to see us do an aggressive, robust outreach to maybe find a community-based model before funding police overtime, and see if there's an alternative there to that before having that. And I think that's the one you're bringing back to study session. But the truck issue, that sounds like an immediate public safety or public health and safety issue. And so I don't know that, given that we are still in the midst of COVID, things are going to start reopening. If that's something that we want to push off to a future study session, it's not, at least not from what I am seeing in the email. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not an ongoing policy. It's not, it's a tangible physical item. And so I just wanted to revisit that component and see if maybe you wanted to re-ask council on that specific piece, because I would certainly be supportive of that, but would not, tell you what to do. But I would be supportive of that.
Mayor, may I respond?
Councilmember Mario.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Councilmember Hiltz. I would be happy to renew the request for the truck for, it is basically a power washing instrument. It's $70,000. And it is very much in line with health and safety along the Colfax corridor. I don't want to get into details of why that is, but just health and safety, maintaining clean streets and sidewalks and buildings, et cetera. So if there's, I just felt like the direction wasn't open to that, but if there's a little more nuance that other council members can appreciate, that it would be put to use right away. It is an immediate need. especially in the cultural arts district.
I'm sorry, Councilmember, are you finished? Are you finished?
Sorry, I think somebody accidentally unmuted. No worries. But yeah, I too would agree with that nuance that it is more focused on immediate concerns. And when we do think of coming out of this pandemic, how do we maintain that consistency and having a dedicated resource there makes a lot of sense. So I'll renew that request given Councilmember Hiltz's comments, and I wouldn't have moved to close that had she been able to speak prior. So I hope that we can entertain that request.
I appreciate that. And if I could just add one follow-up, if we do this, perhaps there's a way to, because I think, will this be a city truck, or is this, who's going to be operating this truck? Is it a city?
Councilmember.
I believe it's a city resource, and that we contract with Ready to Work to for labor.
So this is
that was just something I think is important too, because it's just a great community program as well. Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. I apologize. When I mute, you don't know all the craziness that goes on here. So got a little glimpse of that. So I apologize. No, I was going to say, you know, one of the reasons we go back to study is it's like, are there engineering plans or economic development theory or this or that? It's like Councilmember Murillo and Councilmember Hiltz are like, safety, health and safety. We power wash. It's clean. I got that. So I think it's appropriate. Place plus, you know, I did read through that yesterday. We already have a good partnership with Ready to Work. We have good understanding with that. So I think it's a little different and pretty straightforward to be able to make that decision today, and I would support that.
Are there ongoing operating costs to this proposal? So $70,000 is the one-time cost, but then are there ongoing operating?
No, I think that would be through Ready to Work. So it would be a separate group that would do the labor on this.
No, it's not that. Can staff respond to this?
Yes, I can respond to that. And we contract with Ready to Work right now already. And this would be, we would have them do this task rather than other things that we're having them doing. So we have a contract with them. It's an annual contract. We would just be directing them to doing the power washing and cleaning.
Okay, and so
no new expenditure.
So the $70,000 a year? Is that what it is, or
one time to purchase the truck with the bed-mounted power washer?
Right. But then who assumes the operating cost after that?
It would be a city truck, so it would be, you know, we'd be changing the oil, we'd be, you know, doing maintenance on the truck to make sure it worked. Paying for fuel.
And who's paying for the labor? The driver?
The city that we contract right now with Ready to Work. Right. We have an annual contract with them, and we direct them on what tasks they'll be doing for us. We would direct them to do this power washing and cleaning instead of doing other things. So there'd be no new additional cost for labor.
Okay. Further discussion, Councilmember Hiltz.
Thank you. I just want to point out that that's exactly what Councilmember Murillo just said when you very rudely dismissed her as not knowing what she was talking about. So I just wanted to point that out.
I don't know.
I'm just pointing it out. It's not an argument. I'm just pointing it out, but thank you.
Operating budget is different from capital budget. Further discussion. Councilmember Coombs.
So I just wanted to check if we have this as an asset then in the city, presumably it could also be used in other areas as needed. So it's not just for this one space, but can be used for other power washing for health and safety, wherever that may be needed throughout the city.
Can staff comment on that?
That is correct.
Okay. Further discussion.
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
Yeah, a question for the city manager. If this is a priority, why hasn't city staff brought this forward to city council before?
Mayor,
Yeah, this is,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, has come to light as part of a larger issue in Northwest Aurora that was partly, I think, due to the pandemic. As Councilmember Murillo said, we've had stakeholder meetings where we've reached out between staff and property owners, business owners, and nonprofits in the Northwest Aurora area with some of the things that they've experienced through the pandemic and increased homelessness in the area. We have done some power washing in the area to try to clean things up. The need is greater, and that's why at this point in time, it makes sense to make this investment to be able to do more of that on a regular basis and also on an as-needed basis.
Mayor Dave Gruber, if I could follow up.
Councilmember Gruber.
So, and that's the first time I've heard that. So the purpose of the power washing truck isn't to take care of public, and that's where I was going to go. Are we talking about cleaning public property, or are we talking about cleaning private property? And so the truck is going to be used for cleaning some of the homeless camps and some of the debris and so on that's left around the power. What is the primary purpose of the truck, and who is the primary customer that's going to be served by this? Public property, private property, both, and how's that going to work?
This is for public property. These are streets, sidewalks, alleyways, public parking lots. That's where we're experiencing the problems.
To clean up for the homeless, or for the people experiencing homeless?
Well, some of this we're not sure who's causing it, but it's there and it needs to be cleaned up.
All right, thank you.
Further discussion? With that, is there any objection to the making an appropriation of $70,000 towards this, towards power washing? Seeing none, we'll move forward.
Mayor,
Further proposal. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
It is almost 11 o'clock and our study session is supposed to end in an hour. Is there any way that we can hold off on requests until we get through a couple presentations? I know some people probably made plans knowing that we were ending at noon.
Well, are there any other proposals? There are no other proposals. So with that, first of all, I am on the road maintenance proposal. I'm going to withdraw that because I think it should go before the process, because I want a recorded vote on this issue. It is a major policy issue. Council after council has neglected road maintenance, and it's time to put people on record. And it is a major policy shift. And so it ought to go through a different process. And so, although staff has advised me that it can go through this process, I think Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Johnson raises a good point, but I want a recorded vote on that. So that's not something we need to discuss today. So with that, we're going to take a short break and then we're going to continue. So the time is now 10:53. We will reconvene at 11 o'clock. Um, Study session is called back to order. And Greg, I'll refer to you, defer to you to talk to other programs and road maintenance outside of mine. Proposals.
Oh, okay. So you still want to go through it, but you want to skip your part of the proposal?
Yeah, skip mine. I think it ought to, it's a major policy shift that obligates the city year after year to prioritize road maintenance. And I think it's something that I'd like to bring through the process to go through a committee study session and then to a final vote.
Okay. Okay. Then this won't take long at all. Katie, could I have a share? Katie, could I have share ability? I'm not getting the ability to share, Katie. Let's see, let me see if I can email her. I'm sorry, Mayor, I just still don't have share access yet.
Okay, I'll tell you what, let's move to,
Mayor, if I could, all of us have the slides. So if you just tell us the
Okay.
slide number you want to look at, we could look at it on our own
Sure.
computers.
Absolutely, that's a great point. Thank you very much. Yeah, so on the slides that you have for road maintenance, the first couple of them you've seen before. We definitely talked about it at the winter workshop, but you've seen that many times, that roadway condition curve slide that talks about where we are and such. Slide 3 talks about the fact that this is both a forward and backwards facing issue. So we've got the $20 million ongoing shortfall, but we also have we have a $43 million backlog of projects. And if you need to know more about that, I've got Cindy's here and Tom's here, and they can definitely talk more to that. Both of those we need to do some work on in order to keep our roadway grading where we need to go. Slide 4 you've seen before. That's just the basis of the need for the ongoing road maintenance plan. You can see on if you look at the upper left-hand side, you see the current paving cycle, 29 years arterial, 17 years collector, and 61 years for residential. They want to get to a desired paving schedule cycle of 15, 20, and 25. And in order to do that, that's where you get to the $20 million ongoing need. So I just put some ideas, we had some ideas to solve the ongoing need. I split it into both the ongoing need, the one-time need, and split the ideas into the ongoing needs into whether you needed a vote or you didn't need a vote. All right. Typically, historically, Aurora has had issues getting votes passed. And that's just a fact of the city. We're having a hard time telling the story and telling the story correct, which is one of the reasons why we're trying to get out to the public with the discussions, especially about the capital infrastructure master plan and such like that. We're going to skip slide 6. That's the mayor's proposal about how to do things without increasing taxes. And I will go to slide 7, which talks about other ongoing options that require no vote. Well, one of the things we could do, Trevor's good at making money. We could tax groceries. That's something we don't do. It's something other cities do. Legal espouse that groceries could be taxed without a vote, but it could be legally challenged. And by the way, I'm gonna say that not all of these are you know, that some of these ideas they've all got issues, and some of them have warts and such like that, but they've been out there. The mayor's right. We've been talking about this issue forever. And that's been on the list, but that would get you $18 to $23 million. We've had other tax exemption removals that have not been challenged. Putting my hat on, taking off the budget hat, putting on my personal hat. I know that taxing groceries tends to be what's known as a regressive tax, which means it affects lower income people more than it affects higher income people. People that only have just enough money to buy groceries would feel it a little bit harder in their pocketbook. Another thing that we've talked about in the past is a transportation maintenance fee. Just basically, it would be based on property, where we'd be putting a fee on for transportation projects. When we've talked about this in the past, this was noted as something that we were going to kind of start and ramp up, a lot like the way that we did with the capital impact fees, where we were to start at $5 million, then create a $10 million and a $15 transportation maintenance fee. That's a possibility. Slide 8 talked about a couple of options that require a vote, but get you there quickly. The sales and use tax gets you to $17 million. A quarter cent will get you 17 million. Property taxes will get you to 3.6 mils, will get you to 20 million. Like I said before, we've had a hard time getting any votes passed for that sort of thing.
Sorry to interrupt you. You do have access to share.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, sorry, Councilmember Coombs, did you have something?
No, I did not. I think I just accidentally hit the mute button.
Okay.
All right. So does everybody see my screen, and am I on the right one, or do I need to flip the display setting?
Display settings.
Thank you very much. I love having multiple screens. Okay. And there were a couple ideas for partial coverage. So this is not going to get you all the way to $20 million. And I will say that this was a list that was built 5 years ago. Well, it's actually been built longer than that, but 5 years ago when we talked about a lot of these, there was a lot of these money makers that we've talked about, kind of irregardless of nexus to transportation. I'm just going to say it that way. Number one, requiring vote. We've been talking about this property tax debrucing. The fact of the matter is we're over the Tabor limit in our property tax. And annual amounts would vary, but the last year we refunded $2.9 million in property tax. Now we would have to have a vote, but that was $2.9 million last year. The amounts vary every year because we get to grow at the average of growth plus inflation over time. But if you think about property tax, there's assessment years and non-assessment years. So they tend to come up kind of like a stair step over time. In the past, we've talked about lodgers tax increases. A 1% increase will get you $1 million. Occupational privilege tax is fairly small. A doubling of that, which would be quite a bit, will get you $5 million. Denver does a thing where they have additional taxes on restaurants. If we did that, it would be $1.5 million on that. And then we've had previous discussions on what we call sin taxes specifically on soda, cigarettes, alcohol, those sorts of things. And the ideas vary. The amounts vary on the idea, but a doubling, what guesstimate on that was about $5 million. Couple ideas that don't require a vote. Well, we've got some ongoing marijuana funds sitting in there, just a little bit, a couple $1 million. But that is a possibility. And there were a couple of them that we've talked about at really high levels, not really dug into the details that much, but a vehicle registration fee is one that's been bandied about before. Now that would be onto the vehicle registration form, so it would take county. We'd all have to be on the same page with the counties in order to make that happen. And we've talked before about a trash hauling fee, knowing that the trash haulers cause some of the issues with the city, that sort of thing. We haven't figured out a cost for that, but when we've talked about it before, a long time ago, that tended to have some anti-business sentiment, and we got pushed back pretty hard on that. All right. So then here's a couple combinations of ideas. One possibility, if you didn't want to have any votes, and we'll talk about the mayor's idea later, but you could do a mayor idea and then some money for transportation maintenance fees. If you're willing to go for a vote, this is one that I came up with, hearing your last conversation about mental health and people went, mental health makes sense, but it's a lot of money. So, but what if you did a 1/4-cent sales tax vote when you put half to roads and half to mental health? You get $8.5 million for roads. And if feasible, you could bring both sides to the vote, both people that like roads and people that like mental health. Discussing it with legal, they were kind of hemming and hawing about the single, whether it would work in terms of a single vote.
Single subject rule, you mean?
Yeah, single subject rule. They thought maybe there's a way through it, but we're still, I mean, and it was just kind of a concept idea as opposed to a real one. And then the mayor's idea, and then what we would say after that is that actually makes up some. And then any money that we're currently spending on mental health, since we did the 0.5% to mental health, we could divert some existing funds to other things. So that was our ideas about the ongoing, the one-time road maintenance need. And Mayor, am I assuming that on this one you also want to wait and talk about your idea for one-time stuff?
No, go ahead on that one.
Okay, so there's approximately $43 million in backlog of road maintenance on there. And one idea the mayor was talking about, well, we could possibly do some GO bonds and make it happen. It would require a vote, but it would require a vote with no additional money. Requires $2.4 million annually for 30 years to be able to do the entire backlog of projects. The downside of that, you've now created an ongoing thing, and then in non-ad years, you still have to make that payment. We all know that another thing that's out there, we've got these federal funds, we've got some state funds. There are other pockets of money that may be coming in. We just don't know enough about them yet.
Okay.
About what we're going to have or anything like that. So my question to anyone, to not belabor any of these points, because I didn't want to dig deep into any of this, does anybody want to hear about any other ideas?
This is Mayor Kaufman. Let me just say one thing, and that is we don't know what's going to happen on two levels, on the state and the federal level. But they will both be exploring funding for increased funding for infrastructure that I think in probably in both those plans, we would be a beneficiary of additional money. Again, we don't, I've seen the plan from the state that would put more money, doesn't change our percentage out of the HUTF, Highway Users Trust Fund, but would increase the money going into the Highway Users Trust Fund. We would then receive additional monies from that in terms of the local share. And then there's talk now of a federal infrastructure bill, and I suspect something won't get done. We just don't know much about it because nothing's been introduced at either. No formal proposal legislatively has been introduced at the state or federal level. So there are some things that are pending that could help us with, particularly with that $43 million in terms of the backlog, and to some degree help us with the ongoing road maintenance concerns. And so one of the things, didn't we set aside $500,000 for a consulting work and polling?
Yes. So that's one of the things that actually went away in the 2020 budget. When we talked about it in February, council said go with it. And so, yes, we're moving forward with we're working on that citizen engagement in regards to all of the capital infrastructure master plan projects, which includes this $43 million backlog and the $20 million ongoing.
Okay.
But it's a bigger issue than just this piece.
Right. Okay. So I think we're going to, by the next quarterly study session, or not study session, but what are we, Saturday meeting? I think we're going to know a lot more.
Right.
But I think one of the things, when we get that information, the other proposal that I have that I think ought to go through, have a full debate and be voted on, is flexible in terms that it is only operational when there's a deficit in road maintenance. So if we can plug that road maintenance deficit by other means, then it goes away. If further, okay, let me open up to discussion.
Yes.
Councilmember Coon.
So yeah, actually, I did, in looking at the backup, think that the 1% in ad years toward this issue is a very legitimate idea for how we can start building toward addressing this issue. The way that it was stated on Twitter that we would freeze all spending on any new programs, I don't support that, because we need to be flexible to be able to have new programs if we need them for whatever reason. But I do think that 1% is an idea that I'd like to hear more about and hear from staff about what are the impacts, what would be the overall impacts to doing that 1%, how would it affect other operations, where would we draw that money from? But I think fundamentally we need to have the conversation about asking for some type of tax increase or increases, because the capital needs extend beyond just this road maintenance issue pretty significantly, as we're going to hear. So I think we have to be honest that that's part of the conversation that we need to have. And I'm open to the trash, although I think we've heard about it a lot, the trash hauling fee and oh, now I don't remember what it is. I'm not open to the grocery tax. I just want to be on the record on that. So yeah, those are the ones that I am most interested in hearing more about.
Okay, so the trash hauling.
And let me say, Greg, I'd also, on the registration fee, I don't like the idea of the property tax, because I think that's really regressive. If somebody may not own a vehicle, but be a property owner in a low-income area and be stuck with this bill, I don't think that's appropriate. But I think that registration fee increase on people that own individuals that own vehicles, I think is something that at least we ought to explore in terms of understanding what the numbers are, which we don't have right now.
We don't have right now, right?
Okay, further discussion?
Yes, Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm interested, I think I'd like to know where we are with the $500,000, because we're looking at putting it on the, what year are we, 21, the 2022 ballot, correct?
That was the initial thinking, yeah. That was when we talked about it during the winter time. Terry, would you like to speak to where we are with?
Sure. So basically, we've been doing some additional research, working as a team through cross departments of the city, and we just recently met with the city and county of Denver, and how that they had approached their ballot question. And so basically what we're doing is we're working on an RFP to look at the citizen engagement and just in general, the project management of this, okay. Kind of going at it a little bit differently than we did last time.
Okay. Well, and my concern is that we, a lot of times we just start delaying these requests for proposals. So I just want to make sure that we're staying on top of that, and certainly looking at the Colorado Springs, they had that sunset with it, which made it very successful. Mm-hmm. But I think I don't like fees added on. I think it's not very transparent for taxpayers. I think what probably is the best approach is a combination of some of these ideas. I am against the grocery tax as well. But I have a question on, I know next on the agenda is the American Rescue Plan. We're not going to make a decision on road maintenance because we haven't heard the mayor's proposal. And then I guess my question is, would some of the funding be able to come out of that American Rescue Plan? So I think it's really important that we have to make road maintenance a priority because the roads are falling apart all over the place. I have pictures from constituents, but but I don't know if we have all the information to make decisions.
You're absolutely right, and we're not asking you to make a formal decision today. This is more just if you want more information. And a precursor to the ARPA is that we don't really know yet. Not all the rules haven't been formally stated yet. So once again, they're kind of making it up as they go along, and we may be able to use it for transportation. We may not. We'll find out as we go. But then we can also adjust as we go.
Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Gardner.
So I'm probably pretty hard opposed to almost all of the tax ideas proposed. I think when possible, the burden of taxes should be most put on those who are receiving benefit from the services. So I am not a fan of things like sin taxes or other kind of carve outs that are politically acceptable just to address our road problem. I think as best as possible, we should put the burden for our roads on those who are using our roads. So I am interested in hearing more on transportation maintenance fee or vehicle registration fee. That's something that's been looked at for a long time. And, there's a lot of ways it can be structured, carve outs for seniors, carve outs for schools. I mean, there's a lot of different things we could come up with that I think we could make something work. One of my questions is, could we do a transportation maintenance fee, but kind of go to the voters with it? That's one thing that I'm thinking about to address the transparency issue that Councilmember Bergen brought up. I agree with the general sentiment that this was something we need to address. I remember a presentation, back in 2013, and in a different group, and it was said, "Oh, you don't need to worry about this. The state legislature is going to take care of it." Well, now here we are 8 years later, and the state legislature hasn't taken care of it. And we continue to kick the can down the road. So, I'm in favor of looking at ways that those who use the roads can pay for the maintenance of them. But I like I said, I'm not interested in grocery taxes and sin taxes and that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I do think we'll know a lot more in another quarter, in another few months. As to what's going to come down, what the state's going to do, and what the federal government's going to do. But you're right, Councilmember Gardner, that's not an excuse not to take action. Further, Councilmember Gruber.
So I want to point out an idea. Councilmember Johnston and I are on the Aerotropolis Regional Transportation Authority. This is a $177 million project that's building the roads on the northeast part of town. But something that may be considered and something that we may support or may choose to do through our federal lobbyists and so on is to include this in as new infrastructure. So when the infrastructure bill is discussed, if we could talk about that infrastructure requirement, fund that or have that funded with federal funds, because that's the infrastructure. We're talking about some regional roads. We're talking about interstate overpasses. We're talking about high-speed roads between Denver Airport and I-70. If those could be funded with federal dollars, that would relieve the commitment that both the city and Adams County have made for use tax and property tax for that. So I would like council to encourage our folks to find out if there's any way that we could encourage the federal government to provide that infrastructure for the city of Aurora and free up those funds, because those are fungible dollars, and we could then transfer them to other requirements.
Okay. Further discussion?
Mayor?
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you. Yes, to what Councilmember Gruber said. I was just saying, Greg, could you go to the previous slide that had the different options?
Yes.
Or maybe it would.
The partial coverage options?
Yes, that one. Yes. So similar to what other council members said, no to grocery tax. One of the things that I had supported before, and there was quite the lobby from Denver Waste Management, is we know, and I thought we thought of it as you did a broader term in terms of an 18-wheeler. I just did a little Google search, but I'd love to have this in backup, but that it was a federal study once on that road damage from one 18-wheeler is equivalent to the impact of 9,600 cars. would love to have it verified. So I know we can find a lot on Google, but I want to look at that more. From my understanding is that those heavier trucks do cause the road damage. So it makes more sense that there could be some fees on that to offset it. So that's something that I'd like to have more information on, specifically, and that's where it gets more technical, but the science behind it, if that is true with 18 wheeler. I think we should go broader than just trash, especially with all the construction that we have, but also how would that look for trucks that might be outside of the city coming in? How we would monitor that? I'm sure there's cities that do this, but I'd like to see what that structure would look like to have a fair system in place. So that's something that I'm interested in.
Mayor.
Hiltz. Councilmember Hiltz.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what I said, I think 2 workshops ago, is that a lot of the damage is coming from the west side of Denver, or on the other side of Denver, through Denver, down Hamden, all the way through. And so, when we talk about trash hauling fees, how do we make sure that the Aurora residents aren't taking a disproportionate amount of that burden from damage that's from companies that are coming and hauling not Aurora trash? Because that route, that road, Hamden, I mean, that's straight through and across, and that goes straight to the landfill. And so a lot of these companies and a lot of the contracted companies, they're running through Aurora. Quincy too, depending on the company and the route. So I definitely, I support having that conversation about a trash hauling fee, but I want to make really sure that we're not, punishing Aurora residents for, the volume of trash that's going to be coming through from other cities, which they won't probably give you because that's proprietary information. But also we just need to know that when we add that fee, it's going to get passed right back on to the consumers in the cost of trash pickup because of the current system that we have and because we don't regulate it. So I think we'll see very much like what a DoorDash did, where DoorDash said, well, you're going to hit us over here. So now we're going to charge a fee over here. So just keep in mind, like it'll just get passed back through to the residents. But I'm curious to see what that cost would be. And if there's a way for us to maybe cap the pass-through rate onto consumers, just for, future.
So the, Greg, the marijuana that would be every year?
Yeah, at the moment, we're looking at $2 million, give or take, that's basically unallocated, and it's throughout our 5-year plan. This is the first year. I mean, but prior to this year, we've looked at the marijuana and said, be careful, this could go away. And this year in 2021 budget is the first time we're saying it's not going away nationally.
Yeah.
So
it's probably the Gruber household. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo Councilmember Hiltz and Johnston on the trash hauling. I think, I don't remember, I might have been against it the last time, I can't remember, but I do think we need to revisit that. But I also want to look at going beyond just the trash haulers, as Councilmember Johnston said. There's a lot of those huge construction trucks in my area, and well, probably in any area that has new development going on. And they really have done a number on the roads. Alexander Road, for example, was just completely ripped up and had to be repaved. Now, I think the construction company had to repair it, if I remember correctly, but definitely those trucks are causing a lot of damage on not only local roads, but the major arterials as well.
So one thing I think that we could do is we're going to have a lot more information, I think, in the next few months as to what's going to happen in the legislature, what's going to happen in Congress. And so I do think one thing that we could do in the next quarterly meeting is to figure out what specifically we want to give to our consulting group to do polling as to, what in terms of what has to go to the voters, what would pass. Further discussion.
Mayor,
I'm sorry, Councilmember Lawson.
Yes. Mayor, just on that polling piece, I remember in 2017, we had invited Mayor Suthers from Colorado Springs. And, you know, Colorado Springs has been an area that has never wanted to pass any kind of tax. And even this year, they actually, because of the sunset, people actually voted to continue with this maintenance of the roads. And if you go down there, the roads are great. I just think that we should reach out to them about the campaign. We did have Mayor Suthers come here. I was the mayor pro tem then at 2017. I think we need to actually see what they kind of did to get those those constituents to kind of vote. And how did they do that campaign? I know we talked about Denver, but I think that there's a really good case there because there were voters who did not vote on this stuff, on any kind of road maintenance whatsoever. But within the past, I think when it passed and then it repassed again, people are very willing to want this kind of road maintenance, and then they're also doing infrastructure too in the communities with repairing the sidewalks and things like that. So I'm hoping that we reach out to that jurisdiction.
No, I think that's a great idea. I think that they passed two ballot proposals. I think one was on stormwater, and I think the other one was on transportation. But I think the transportation one might have been on mass transit. I'm not sure. But I think a presentation by them would be great because they've been successful.
Berzins.
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. And I just wanted to kind of tag on to the asking people for an increase in taxes. To keep in the back of our minds that the big federal increase is supposed to come down in like October. So that could affect voters. I don't know that there was a big tax increase when Colorado Springs voted on their tax increases for roads. But I mean, if we get these huge increases from the government, you know, our chances are of citizens voting another tax increase on themselves just 2 weeks later, it's something we're really going to have to consider.
Councilmember Gardner.
So I just want to bring up a point, and Councilmember Hiltz alluded to it a little bit in her comment. But when I brought forward what was a temporary cap on the fees for DoorDash, several council members had concerns about those fees being passed on to consumers, which they ultimately did pass those fees along. And yet here we are talking about increasing fees on trash haulers and other businesses and things like that, and but permanently. And without a doubt, what will happen is those costs will be passed along to consumers. Businesses don't create capital out of thin air. They bring in revenue from their customers, and so businesses will pass those costs along. And if we really want to talk about being transparent to our residents, that's might be the least transparent way we could go about this, is taxing businesses or feeing businesses, I guess, whatever we want to call it, when we know that ultimately those are going to be passed along to consumers. And the irony is, or further irony is, a lot of the damage to roads is also caused by City of Aurora vehicles, whether that's snow plows and other heavy duty equipment. So I'm not sure if we would fee ourselves or how that would work. But, I don't think that's a very transparent way to go about it, because we would essentially be raising costs on our residents, but hiding it and calling it a business fee.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay, I think staff has some direction.
Yep, Mayor.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of run down the list and I guess give my 2 cents. I don't know if Greg is taking a tally or not, but
take your votes.
All right, great. I am interested in debrucing for property tax. I know we're debruced for sales tax, and that's been a big benefit for the city. So I'd like to see if we could do the same for property tax. The lodger's tax, occupational privilege tax, and tax on restaurants. I'm interested in more information, but I'm kind of leaning towards no on that. I don't understand why Denver taxes restaurants specifically more. That just seems kind of strange. And then, of course, with lodgers and OPT, I'd want to see how we would compare to neighboring jurisdictions. And then, I guess, getting down to vehicle registration fees and trash hauling fees. it's not, I don't think Councilmember Gardner is necessarily wrong that would effectively be a tax, or, the cost would increase due to the structure of that. But I mean, I think part of this is that we do need to be very clear about the cost of maintaining, the suburban sprawl that we have. And I think do a little bit of education on that. And also maybe revisit how we're growing and planning as a city. And my concern on vehicle registration fees is that it's already very expensive to register your vehicle in Colorado. I think that's why we see a lot of people with out-of-state plates, but that have definitely lived here for several years. And I think that's more of that latter part is more of an issue for the state the state and our counties to address. But at the same time, again, that those are the folks who are ostensibly using the roads more. So I would be interested in more information on that as well. And then I am interested in the combo with the sales tax. Well, not necessarily even sales tax. I don't like messing with sales tax because it's regressive, but if we can do even more so than property tax, frankly, but if we can do something and maybe combine the road and mental health issue, I think there is a there where we can maybe create a coalition of folks who'd be willing to support that.
Okay.
Further discussion.
Hiltz.
Councilmember Hiltz.
And I'm happy to talk with Greg more about this in detail because I just wasn't something I planned on exploring today. But I think it might be appropriate to also look at some other areas of spending, such as the money that we're putting into programs like Visit Aurora, and whether or not the amount of money that we're putting into that is generating that ROI and what that looks like. And if there's any savings to be captured there. This is a conversation I've had with staff, and I've expressed some concerns, directly with Visit Aurora. And I do think it might be worth just getting a holistic look of the lodgers tax that we passed. We passed that carve out for that on top of the existing funding options. And with COVID, and obviously the lack of travel and tourism, just what that ROI looks like, and if there's a way to adjust any of our spending there, or if it doesn't make sense to do that, but at least take a look at it.
Okay. Further discussion. Saying now just real quickly, I think on the property tax debrucing, I think there's value to that, but it has to be for a dedicated source, and our polling would have to tell us what maybe that source would be that the voters would support. I'm very leery about a lodgers tax simply because of the hospitality industry and how important it is here for big venues like the Gaylord and who attract large groups and that are probably price sensitive. Occupation privilege taxes as a small business employer, I think that's kind of offensive. Additional tax on restaurants, that industry has really suffered. Sin taxes, not a big fan. Use of marijuana taxes, great funds. Vehicle registration fees, we need the numbers on that. Trash hauling fee, I'd like to see the numbers on that. Further discussion.
Mayor Hiltz.
Councilmember Hiltz.
I just don't want my request to be mischaracterized. I'm not talking about whether or not we should remove the lodgers tax. There's many funding sources that go into Visit Aurora, including a carve out that we just did, I think last year. And so my question is, getting information and an evaluation of whether or not we're generating that positive ROI, or if there's a different way that we could be shifting that funding. That's a very separate conversation from whether or not we should have a lodgers tax. So I don't want, you to maybe tweet that I'm trying to end the lodgers tax. So I just want to make that very clear. That's my proposal.
I've already tweeted that out, so I don't know how I take that.
Well, I'm just going to have to go retweet it with clarification.
Let me say this is one thing that we don't do that the state does that I think is very important is they have an audit committee and they have an auditor and with its department, and what they do is not simply financial audits but performance audits, and the performance audits actually tell you what the efficacy of different programs, and it's just very, very helpful to the General Assembly. Further discussion.
Yes, I used to teach that, so I'm well aware of how those work. Thank you.
Okay, I'll tweet that out. Okay, anything else? Okay,
all right.
I think you got direction. Let's see. American Rescue Plan overview.
All right, so Mike Franks will be coming in.
Yes, good morning, afternoon, Mayor, Mr. Mayor, members of council. If I could have access to share my screen. If not, I can.
By the way, for everyone, this is Greg. Mike Franks is our newest big brain in the budget office. He just started in January, and now we're already putting him out in front of you. So very impressive person. I'm not sure if any of you have met him before. So Mike Franks.
Not yet, but nice to meet everybody. Mike Franks, I'm the new budget finance program manager. It's a pleasure. So today I'm here to talk about the American Rescue Plan overview. And the big picture here is that we still don't have all the information that we need to know to make final decisions. We do have some significant guidance. The Treasury Department has not yet issued final guidance, so we don't have clarity on exactly what we can spend the money on and different things like that. So this is just the initial giving everybody a feel of what we have right now, but there'll have to be some follow-ups. So what we do know, some backup, it was signed into law on March 11th. Obviously 1.9 trillion total package with a significant amount of funding for a variety of different areas. At this point, it's anticipated that the city will actually receive approximately $73 million. So that number has changed a little bit, but that is the general area, the $72 to $73 million that we anticipate. We're also anticipating getting additional funding for a variety of other programs. We already know we'll receive $4.15 million in home funds, and that's for the development of affordable house tenant-based rental assistance, supportive services, and acquisition and development of non-congregate shelter units. So there are some funding opportunities out there like that we have already received money for as well, in addition to the $72 million, or 73. The funding will be divided into two payments. So the city should be receiving their first payment within 60 days of the day that the bill was signed, so March 11th. So we should be receiving that fairly quickly. And the second one would come 1 year later. And then we have to spend all the funds by December 31, 2024. So we have a few years to spend the funds, but it is still a significant amount of funding to be able to spend in that time frame. So they have to be somewhat project or shovel-ready projects. And again, we are still waiting on additional guidance from the Treasury that will help us refine this presentation and give you some more guidance. So how can we spend the funds? So this is what we know at this point. Again, Treasury guidance will come out and give us some more information, but this is what we currently have. So one of the first areas is the ability to respond to public health emergency with respect to COVID. So this really is rental assistance, household, small business assistance, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. The next is basically revenue losses. So it says for the provision of government services, but this is essentially money that we lost that was not due to fee changes, but due to COVID-19, and we think that would be approximately $20 million. We could potentially have it be a little bit more, a little bit less. But that money, as we currently understand it, would be free to use in any purpose we want. That's just basically revenue makeup money. We also have the ability to make investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. I will note there that at this point, transportation has not been included. We have water, sewer, and broadband, but they do not specifically note transportation. So while those funds could be ultimately included and used for transportation, at this point, the guidance does not appear to give us that flexibility. We also include premium pay for eligible employees performing essential work, and it provides us the ability to transfer to a nonprofit organization. So those are the broad areas where we think we can spend it at this point based on the guidance that's out there. In terms of how we cannot spend the funding, either directly or indirectly offset a reduction to a net tax revenue change. So basically, if we made a change in the revenue, we're not able to offset those costs. So if we lowered property taxes and it costs us some additional revenue, we can't use this funding to offset that. And no fund shall be deposited into pension funds. So we cannot use it to shore up the pension funds. So at this point, staff is considering using the same spending categories we used last time for the CARES funding. So from left to right, you have the community assistance, aid to residents, small business relief, food distribution, community partner pass-throughs, and infrastructure funding, then service preservation. We still think this fits in fairly nicely. We have funding as to be determined, but we think these capture the broad spirit of what the current guidance says, and we think it worked fairly well to have it split up into those different categories in terms of organizing it last time. So that's the current plan. So there are a variety of different factors and guidance that's come out from GFOA and different other organizations that have kind of are trying to help local governments with lessons learned from the first stimulus and just overall big picture thinking about how best to go about doing this and implement it. So the first one is to select one-time projects or short-term initiatives instead of new programs. Ultimately, the city will be required to absorb the long-term operating costs of new programs. So if we do, it could be a shot in the arm for transportation, but ultimately it's not going to be a long-term solution to the maintenance issue. So it's one-time dollars that are not going to be recurring in nature. So we need to think about that and spend them in a manner that's not going to dig us a hole into future years. It does provide an opportunity to address deferred maintenance and enhance infrastructure. So getting, again, transportation, it could provide us a shot in the arm there. We also have the CIMP requirements, which you'll hear from IT here soon, but there's a variety of other departments that have other infrastructure needs. So it's an opportunity there. Broadband infrastructure, smart cities, different things along those lines are covered within it. So those are where we're thinking that it would be the most likely and obvious areas to put it, because they are generally one-time costs. We have needs, and it would allow us to get kind of a good bang for the buck and get us a good start there as we identify long-term revenue options. And it also provides an opportunity to build or rebuild financial reserves. So Greg mentioned earlier that the operating reserve will be one of the things that's fully going to fill it back up, if you will, and be fully covered. But there are additional opportunities to add additional reserves. The rating agencies love having additional reserves. And this is, while we hope there's not another pandemic, there's always going to be different opportunities or situations out there that could cause another financial challenge. So the more we have in reserves, the better we're going to be positioned to address those in the future. Some other factors to consider: we do have the opportunity to apply for additional funding to establish regional partnerships to leverage the dollars. So in addition to the direct funding to citizens and to local governments, the bill includes billions in additional grant opportunities, and those are spread through a variety of different programs. And additional guidance is coming on those, but we do know that funding is out there and that there'll be a lot of opportunities to leverage those grants. There are also the opportunity for regional partnerships to leverage funding, and that has been encouraged by the Colorado Municipal League. So to go and look and work with other municipal areas or cities and towns to make sure that if we have a common need that we're working together and leveraging the funding that we have. So one of the recommendations and one of the decision points that I'll get to at the end, but based on these factors, staff does think that the creation of a grant coordinator position could be beneficial. So that would be a type of position that would allow us to coordinate these regional partnerships and to try to leverage these funding opportunities. And if an infrastructure bill ultimately did get passed at the federal level, that'd be another opportunity that this position could be incredibly helpful with doing those same activities, just for another large pot of money. And this would be a short-term, kind of look at, see how it works over the next couple of years. We think it would pay for itself and be a good investment, but we have the opportunity to make sure that that's the case. The city will also be required to establish strong compliance and reporting programs. So one of the things that was noted last time with the CARES funding is that a lot of departments that don't generally deal with federal grants were managing federal dollars, and there are a lot of additional requirements that come with that. And folks that were doing their best, but were still challenged to make sure that they were reporting in the right way. And that has led to some challenges within finance. So with that, one of the additional recommendations is the creation of a grant compliance position to work with departments and to make sure that we're managing the funds as if we should and managing the funds in an appropriate manner. The hope for both these, I would note, is that we would be able to cover these funds or these positions with the funds in the program. We are not sure with the guidance currently if that'll be possible yet, but we do hope and think that that's a strong possibility. Finally, this does provide an opportunity for the city to review services virtualized during the pandemic and permanently convert those. So that's been a big message in a variety of the different webinars and different programs out there, that based on the pandemic, based on the fact that we had the CARES funding, which a lot of cities, including Aurora, used to increase our ability to work remotely. This next bill will ultimately allow us to invest in broadband, that this is an opportunity to look at how we're doing things and to think about doing things in a more creative manner. So that's something that I know everybody's looking at across the country, and Aurora is as well. So with that, my two questions, or a few questions. Does council have any questions related to ARPA?
I do. Oh,
Okay. And then does council have any additional guidance for what staff should consider? And then finally, is council okay with the creation of 2 grant positions to help with regional opportunities to ensure compliance?
But why don't we do the first 2 questions first? I think they're pretty much related. Any discussion on the first 2?
yes.
Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, so I can't ask about the grant yet? Grant
No, I want to ask, let's do that second.
Second, okay. So on the slide that has funding cannot be used to offset a reduction in the net tax revenue that results from a change in law, regulation, or administrative interpretation during the covered period that reduces any tax. It's a little bit confusing, but so we can't use it where we had a reduction during COVID. Is that? I'm trying to understand that sentence.
If it was something that the city did to cause a reduction, we couldn't use it to cover it. For something, for example, for sales tax, if sales tax went down, we are able to use that if it was because of COVID to reimburse ourselves. But if we had lowered the sales tax rate and that was the result of the revenue reduction, that we could not use it to cover that.
Okay, and then on the water, so it can be used for water or wastewater. If we use it for a water project, can the water department transfer funds to the general fund? Being creative.
I'm not sure how we've generally handled the mechanics.
You know what? That's an interesting question. Let us take a look at that.
Okay.
And then come back.
Okay.
I think that's an intriguing possibility.
Well, but it's our water is an enterprise fund, so that's another complication in that.
Right. It would be interesting, but we'll look at it.
Further discussion on the first 2? Okay. Councilmember Gruber.
Terry Velasquez is on. Terry, didn't we have somebody working grants before? I mean,
let's go. Okay. Are we done with the first 2 and then we'll go to the third?
No, Mayor, I have a question.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you. Or I guess it's technically would fall under additional guidance for staff, but it does include a question. So I did see that broadband infrastructure is something that we have listed on slide. Well, they're not numbered, but one of the earlier slides. And I'm just curious about that because one of the things I'd like to see us do is utilize these, one-time monies for ongoing benefit. And I think that broadband is something that there's a lot of interest in from our residents here. Folks are not satisfied with the current offerings, and sadly, as a country, we kind of lag the rest of the world in terms of broadband speeds and affordability. So I'm curious, is part of what y'all are proposing here to make more direct investments into rolling out broadband in the city, potentially leading up to like a broadband enterprise or something like that, like Longmont, I want to say, has done?
At this point, there's no formal proposal in terms of exactly what we recommend. We're hoping for the additional guidance to come out, but I know, or at least I believe that IT for their upcoming presentation did break things down into potential areas that would allow areas where we could spend the stimulus dollars and areas where we probably could not in terms of broadband infrastructure. So I think you'll get a little bit of a feel of the different things we could do based on their CIMP presentation. I will let them clarify if that is incorrect.
Further comment on the first 2 questions, and we'll get to the third.
I have a question.
Councilmember Brosens.
Thank you. On this slide, your 4th bullet down, premium pay for eligible workers performing essential work. I know we did something for our first responders through a year ago, December, but I mean, COVID continued to move on. Can we think about doing something else for them? Because they continue to go in. It's not only our first responders, it's maybe our ambulance workers too.
Yeah, are you asking if we could go back and kind of give them retro pay, or if we could?
Yes, because they continue to go, to go into COVID areas and take care of COVID people.
Yeah, and my understanding is based on the bill that we would have the flexibility to do that. At least that's the my understanding. I'd have to defer to others on
Okay, yeah, I would like to
the
explore
feasibility
that.
of doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to explore that.
Further discussion on the first two? Seeing no further discussion on the first two, then Councilmember Gruber to the third question.
Okay, my point was, or my point is that I believe we've been managing grants for a long, long time, and we had a grant position. So I support bringing in hiring an FTE for this. The return on investment on that, especially if we can use federal funds to pay for that person, is going to be very important as we move forward.
I would like to know if federal funds could be used to engage a firm that does grant writing, because there's a lot of talent, particularly in the Denver metro area, in terms of people that do that, particularly people that could leverage that with working with other local governments. And so I'd like to know if that could be done, paid for through this, because I'm concerned about hiring somebody for what is a temporary position.
And Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, my question on the grant coordinator position is that we're supposed to use these funds through 2024, and yet we're going to create a whole new department again, or two positions. So I would rather it be a contract position, whether it be through a firm or two individuals, but that it be a contract that ends 2024, December 2024.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
I guess is the idea for these grant positions to not just help with applying for grants through ARPA, but to help with grants generally speaking with the city. I think that's kind of what Councilmember Gruber and Bergen were both alluding to here. And would they be able to assist some of our quasi-governmental organizations like Aurora Sister Cities as well?
Yeah, the intention would be that they would they are truly needed right now based on the extreme workload that'll come with this additional influx of money, but that long term that there will be added benefit as well. And just to clarify, we are hoping that they will be funded. We'll be able to fund them with the funding that's provided by the federal government, but with that is still somewhat uncertain. So we may have to be utilizing general fund dollars for that 3-year period, even if we do use a contractor as well.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments? Seeing none, I think that there is a specific ask, I think, for 2 FTE. Am I correct in that, Mike? I think you're muted.
Yeah, two full-time positions, or we could go the contract route, but at least the assistance, the grant assistance that we think we'll need for these for administrating these funds, and then making sure that council's okay with utilizing these funds primarily for yeah, that's the primary piece. It's just the 2 positions.
Let's see, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I would recommend that we have the positions, but as contingency positions, meaning contract.
Can you, let me ask an HR question is, can you have full-time positions under contract with the city?
Yes.
Where they're not employees, you can do that?
Yeah, so we would, and so the difference between the contract and the full-time employees, if we do the contract route, they would not sit on our payroll. They would be 1099 employees. We could also do a temporary employee with a defined duration for the project that would be on our payroll. So there's a couple of options available.
Okay. I certainly could. What is there a preference from the staff? I just want to, I just think that it ought to be time limited.
This is Terry, and I would just say that, sometimes we pay more for the contract employees because there's an overhead cost. The temp employees would be on our payroll, would also receive benefits since they would be full-time. So either way that we go, I think there are some additional costs that we're asking to include in that besides their salary.
Question?
Mayor Pro Tem.
So if we did the temporary employee with the defined two-year or whatever till December 2024, 24 timeframe, they would be eligible for benefits, which would be covered under this American, whatever it's called, the American Recovery thing, right?
That's our hope. I don't think we've seen all the guidelines yet to know that that would be the fact.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor,
Councilmember Gruber.
I'd like to do a compromise on this. I'd like at least one person to be a full-time employee whose primary job is working this grant, but also has oversight on all of the other grants that the city is pursuing. And that FTE would be augmented by either a contractor or 1099 employees with a shorter term duration. I think the city's been very successful in bringing grants from other locations. And within management and finance, we've spoken about this before, having this as a person who coordinates all the activities that are going on in all the different departments so that each of the departments is successful in applying for grants, fire department, police department, so on. I think will have a long-term benefit for the city.
Okay. Discussion on the Gruber proposal.
Mayor
I'm sorry, it's
Johnston.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you. I do like Councilmember Gruber saying about overseeing some of those other departments. With my experience of overseeing contractors and being a contract grant writer, I agree with Terry Velquez that it costs a lot more. And when you have an employee who's full-time, I mean, grant writing, it's a lot, research. And it's like we're paying the same amount hourly, whether it's research or writing the grant. And I just think having that full-time employee, I also am open to this not being short-term. I think when you get the right person for a grant writer, they consistently bring in more funding than you're spending on their salary and benefits. I mean, it's still up to the supervisor. If they're not performing, then there's a mechanism in place for them not to continue. But
it's a very lengthy. It's a very lengthy mechanism.
Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So if we went, I mean, I like the Gruber proposal with one full-time and one contract, but with the full-time, can we put that in their performance standards that, I mean, if they're bad at getting grants, it should be somewhat performance-based.
Well, it'd be performance-based, and I'll defer to HR, but you have to go through a fairly lengthy process, to fire a public employee. It's not easy. HR.
Yeah, so this is Deanna Giordano. And so, yes, if they're full-time employees, they would have certain rights that are extended to them. And performance is, would be expected to be managed. On the first 6 months, it's a lot easier because it's an introductory evaluation period. So if they're not performing to the standards we expect, there's an ability to terminate without all of the additional due process. Beyond that timeline, it does have some steps and layers that would need to be accomplished before a separation decision can be made. Usually about a year, 6 months.
Okay, further discussion? So we have a proposal by Councilmember Gruber. Is there opposition to his proposal?
Mayor?
Councilmember Johnston.
I would like to give that, I definitely want the one full-time employee, but are we able to give that discretion to staff? I'd love to have 2 full-time employees, but if staff is like, it's better for us to get a contract with this specific expertise, I'd feel more comfortable seeing what staff would like. But at minimum, I'd like to have full-time, but I'm leaning toward 2 just because of the costs and still having that introductory period and all of that. But I feel like that's more of a staff lane.
I can answer that, Mayor. And the proposal is for 2. However, if council's preference is that we do the full-time employee and supplement with the, contract employee, we can try that and just report back on how it's going.
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Oh.
Mayor.
Councilmember Gruber.
So in my experience, I've done that a lot in my experience. The idea is that you hire one person, you bring in a 1099. After at some point in time, the 1099, you determine whether or not the return on investment of that person is working, and then staff will have normally has the authority to convert that 1099 into a permanent employee. So I think we could have the best of both worlds on here, where if the 1099 performs well, the staff would simply, and I don't know whether they'd need our authority for that, but staff could convert that into a full-time based on performance.
Further discussion?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the same point that, you know, I think if we do the one full-time, the one contract, you would have that ability based on then evaluating their performance to convert that to a full-time employee.
Further discussion?
Mayor,
Councilmember Gardner.
this seems like we're way to the extreme micromanaging our city manager in terms of what his ask was. To me, the ask was for 2 full-time employees, and I would support that ask.
Further discussion?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
I think if it's the city manager's job, why did it even come to us? I think, you know, the request is, should we have 2? Councilmember Gruber came up with a proposal for 1 full-time and 1 contract, and that's what I'm supporting.
Further discussion?
Mayor,
Councilmember Coombs.
the ask was for us to support giving the funds to hire the 2 people, which I do.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there objection to the Gruber proposal?
Mayor.
Murillo. Further objection?
I object.
Councilmember Lawson.
Coombs.
Councilmember Coombs.
Marcano, just in case you didn't catch me.
Further objection? Seeing none, the Gruber amendment will move forward. I'm sorry, the Gruber proposal will move forward. Okay.
Mayor?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. I thought we were talking about either the city manager's proposal or Councilmember Gruber's proposal, which were different.
Councilmember Gruber's proposal is what we're talking about.
And I thought there were more objections than support.
I only got 4.
So, okay, maybe I'm confused.
I support the city manager's proposal. I don't know what that means I object to, but I support what the city manager is asking for.
Well, the city
Same
manager,
here.
they could just do Councilmember Gruber's proposal.
That's different than the city manager's proposal, Mayor?
Let me ask it again.
Okay, thank you.
I'd prefer it if people would listen. Is there any objection to Councilmember Gruber's proposal?
Johnston.
Gardner.
Helps.
Marcano.
Murillo.
Coombs? Okay. Majority are in opposition. Is there any objection to 2 FTEs? Seeing none, then we'll move forward with 2 FTEs. Capital Infrastructure Master Plan.
And Mayor, I want to check in before we get started here. It's almost 10 after 12, and we show ourselves as adjourning at noon.
Is this time sensitive, capital infrastructure master plan?
What we could do is, I just had a brief intro. I wanted to explain a little bit about the process, and what we could do is have the IT department present. You know, we council agreed to 1 hour at study session once a month, and what we could do is have IT do their presentation at the second study session in May. Set aside 1 hour in that.
Okay.
Is that acceptable? And I just wanted to say quickly that, you know,
is there any objection to doing that? Okay, fine. Okay. Jim, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to go over quickly what we asked departments to provide and include in every one of their proposals that they have in the capital infrastructure master plan. So obviously, cost of a project was important, but it was not only identifying what might be a one-time cost, but ongoing costs would be associated with that. For example, you can't just build a fire station, you've got to staff it. So that's an example of that. We also asked for a narrative type description of what the project was, what the needs were, and so on. We asked for location, if location was known. So if there was maybe an intersection improvement, obviously we'd have to have a location. If it's a future construction of a library, we don't necessarily know where that's going to be, other than maybe it's in the northeast area of the city. Then we also asked for each project to look at, is there a cost share available? Will the improvement result in increased revenue to the city? Are there grants available to help fund it? So those were important aspects. We also asked, does this meet council goals? Does this comply with the Aurora Places comp plan? Is it a part of what we talked about about a year and a half ago, key places that we've identified within the city? We also asked if this was if a project was if a project was supporting employment centers somewhere in the city. Then also just kind of a broad question, not real specific, but just in terms of the criticality of a project. So, for example, the Peoria Bridge over Sand Creek is structurally deficient. That would be a critical project for the city in replacing that bridge. So at any rate, those were the kind of the filters and the information we asked for on each project that was submitted. And as each department presents their projects, they will walk you through each of those aspects that we required them to provide information on. And with that, I again just wanted to let you know, give you kind of the framework of the departments, what the departments were looking through in terms of submitting projects.
Questions of the city manager? Seeing none, the workshop is adjourned.